If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
C41. A look of confusion washed over Shirou's face as he couldn't help but ask, "Auntie, are you sure you have the right person?" "I apologize, I made a mistake." Artoria's eyes dulled as she apologized. She realized that this was not her Camelot, but rather the modern era, more than 1,500 years later. The wise princess had long since disappeared. Shirou walked away, still confused. He had thought that his identity had been uncovered, and he had double-checked the sun to confirm that it was daylight. "What's the matter, Saber?" Irisveil approached and inquired. "Nothing, I just thought I recognized someone," Artoria replied with a solemn expression. Irisveil glanced at Shirou's back and couldn't help but chuckle. "The person you knew, is it someone else's child?" "No, just someone who resembled someone I knew when they were young," Artoria replied before walking away with Irisveil. Shirou, adhering to his pre-planned schedule, headed to the police department in Fuyaki City, but he couldn't shake off a strange sensation in his heart. He shook his head, trying not to dwell on these random thoughts, and instead focused on the Holy Grail War, and his survival. He arrived at the Fuyaki City Police Department and noticed that it was busier than it was during his last visit, which was to be expected as there had been a terrorist attack the previous night. A district of rental houses was rigged with C4 explosives and had been detonated, resulting in a raging inferno. Although the area affected by the attack was not economically well off, and the targeted rental house was in an isolated area, there were no significant casualties. However, the impact was far-reaching. The Fuyaki City Police Department bore the brunt of it as they were responsible for ensuring the safety of the citizens. They had failed to capture the perpetrator and prevent the terrorist attack, which greatly damaged their reputation. As a result, the entire Fuyaki City Police Department was mobilized to capture the terrorists, but their efforts were hindered by the terrorists' sophisticated methods and lack of clues. Just as the department was in a state of panic, Shirou stepped in and provided a crucial lead. Shirou used suggestion to infiltrate the office of the department head and ultimately gained control over him. Last night's terrorist attack was carried out by members of a transnational terrorist organization, led by a local individual named Kiritsugu. Initiate a pursuit immediately. Be advised, this person is heavily armed and extremely dangerous. In the event of an encounter, use deadly force instead of attempting to make an arrest. Kiritsugu had nearly killed him the previous night, so as a form of reciprocation, Shirou used suggestion to reveal Kiritsugu's characteristics and draw a detailed image of him. With this information, the department head, under the influence of suggestion, issued an order for a reward and wanted notice of Kiritsugu's capture. However, the order to use deadly force may not be practical, as an official organization must follow proper procedures to avoid illegal action and disorder. Under the influence of suggestion, the department head obtained information about Kiritsugu, becoming extremely angry and demanding answers from his department. Contact them all. How could they let a dangerous criminal bring weapons into the country? What are they doing? Suggestion is similar to hypnosis, it can influence the surface consciousness but cannot change the subconscious and personality. The department head's reaction was entirely his own nature. In order to avoid exposure, Shirou only used suggestion to control the department head and issued orders through him, instead of trying to hypnotize the entire police department. Nobody would have thought that a modern traitor would appear in the midst of the conservative Magi community, and the first one to be attacked by this modern traitor was Kiritsugu, known as a Magus killer. Shirou had specific reasons for choosing Kiritsugu as his first target. Firstly, Kiritsugu had attacked him the previous night, nearly killing him, which gave Shirou a personal stake in his capture. Using personal anger and a sense of self-preservation as motivation, the suggestion issued is less likely to be rejected by the brain and subconscious. Secondly, Kiritsugu's modern thinking and methods make him particularly dangerous to Shirou, and he also has a personal vendetta against him as Artoria has sworn to kill him. For these reasons, it makes sense for Kiritsugu to be eliminated first. As for the chances of the police capturing Kiritsugu, it is highly unlikely, but the bounty and wanted notice issued by the department can make it difficult for him to hide. Kiritsugu may also use suggestion, like Shirou, to conceal himself, but it will still cause him inconvenience for a time. In this ongoing economic depression, a bounty has been issued, and it's been proven that money can sometimes be an even greater motivator than magic among mortals. This is especially true when it comes to significant, high-stakes matters such as obtaining clearance for a potentially dangerous element to pass through the country, which is a prime example of the true functioning of a nation's machinery. When Scathatch brought the topic to his attention, Shirou's initial impulse was to head to the American military base in Okinawa and look for missiles that he could launch at the Tosaka household. However, upon further reflection, he realized that the world of fate, with its many secrets and mysteries, would likely have countermeasures in place to prevent such actions from the scientific world. Shirou considered that even though he could use suggestion on the police department in Fuyaki City, the military, being the backbone of the country's violent force, would undoubtedly have countermeasures in place. He realized that if any magus could easily manipulate the military with suggestion, this world would have long been thrown into chaos, so it is a logical assumption that there would something in the military. Additionally, Shirou realized that even if he were able to acquire a missile, the military would certainly launch an investigation, and the entire country would be mobilized. This was not a situation he wanted to be in. So, he decided not to take the risk of attacking the Tosaka household. Therefore, Shirou knew that he needed to come up with something truly significant, a plan that would have a real impact in the true sense of the word. Compared to this plan, reporting Kiritsugu to the authorities is not worth mentioning. However, despite having mentally prepared himself for this, every time Shirou thought about it, he would hesitate. He stared at his right hand, his gaze wavering. If he went through with his plan, there would be no going back. Even if he managed to survive the Fourth Holy Grail War, the Mages Association, the Holy Church, and even the counter-force may all seek to kill him directly as a result. The outcome of this plan could have a significant impact on the world and could potentially change the course of history. He wants to reveal the entire mystery. Shirou's thought was to create a bigger event that would disrupt the Holy Grail War, making the situation extremely chaotic, and then use the opportunity to survive. But he was uncertain if he was ready to go through with it, as it would have irreversible consequences. Even if he managed to survive the Fourth Holy Grail War, the supernatural forces and the scientific community may still try to kill him in the future. Exposing the mystery to countless people, what does it mean? Exposing the existence of magic and the supernatural to the general public would have far-reaching and potentially catastrophic consequences. It would mean that the secrecy that has long been maintained by the Mages Association and other similar organizations would be broken, leading to a complete upheaval in the current power structures and possibly causing widespread panic and chaos among the general population. This would mean that the worlds of magic and science would be at war, with the supernatural and the natural at odds with each other. The battle between idealism and materialism would also be intensified, as the unknown and known would engage in a final showdown. The ramifications of this would be far-reaching and could lead to a complete reordering of society and the world as he knows it. After much contemplation, Shirou ultimately didn't have the courage to reveal the secrets of these two worlds and instead, he decided to take the second option. He removed his gloves, showed the seal mark to the head of the police department and said the terrorist in Fuyaki City has a red mark on the back of his right hand. In addition, there are 6 people in Fuyaki City with this same mark, they are all transnational criminals. Track them down, notify the television station, and make a wanted notice. The head of the police department followed the instructions, and under the influence of suggestion, the painter drew the pattern of the command seals, and the television station was also notified. After completing these actions, Shirou put on his gloves again and quietly left the building, blending into the shadows of the alley. He still had to go to the television station. The command of the police department alone was not enough, as this news would cause panic among the people of Fuyaki City and the television station would not dare to air it without the approval from the higher UPS. Shirou knew that he still had to go to the television station to use suggestion to make sure the wanted notice would be broadcasted. Will these actions be useful? Of course they will. As long as he can stir up this stagnant water, it will be useful. However, after this incident, it is likely that all the other masters will see him as a threat. But this doesn't concern Shirou, as he already prepared Ryunosuke for this purpose. Even if he is traced back, the only one that will be found is Ryunosuke, who has already been set up as a scapegoat by Shirou. As long as Ryunosuke is known as Caster's master, Shirou can hide in the shadows and reap the benefit. Using Ryunosuke, a complete murderer who takes pleasure in killing people, as a scapegoat made Shirou uncomfortable, as it meant selling him out, letting him take the blame and die. It was the first time Shirou had to make this kind of decision. This is truly a precious feeling. But for Shirou now, it is an extravagance. However uncomfortable it may be, he had to continue, as the other person deserved it, and most importantly, everything he did was for survival. Suddenly, Shirou's footsteps faltered as the feeling of being watched, which he had initially felt, returned to his mind. Glancing around, he spotted Gilgamesh, dressed casually, curiously observing him from a nearby street. Was he seen? Had he been discovered? Shirou was unsure of how to handle this situation. Gilgamesh had been aware of his true identity from the start, treating him as a source of amusement. He never knew what went on in Gilgamesh's mind. Sighing inwardly, Shirou could only feign ignorance and make his exit. Humph! Gilgamesh let out a haughty snort. You've grown rather quickly. I had thought I would have to give you a test tonight, but it seems unnecessary. Your courage has been awakened and so does your wisdom, you're only missing bravery. Very well, it is time for it to arrive. Gilgamesh turned his head, his blood-red eyes looked in the direction of Ryuadu Temple. Burn! Burn! Burn to your heart's content. I wonder, what kind of mongrel will you burn into in the end? He wore a smile, a complex one that conveyed a mix of emotions. It was merciful and cruel, evil and good, tolerant and domineering, joyful and sad. This blend of meanings instilled a feeling of creepy horror in those who saw it. C42. Waver's relationship with Iskandar dropped to the freezing point. That's right, it's all that guy's fault. Waver seethed with anger, viewing Iskandar as crude, impolite, and most of all, disrespectful. He had joined the Holy Grail War with the aim of proving his worth and prevailing over other magi. He wanted to demonstrate to the arrogant, dismissive people at Clock Tower, who had belittled him, that he was a gifted and talented magus. His ambition was to be acknowledged for his theories on Magecraft and be recognized as a child prodigy, akin to Kenneth. Though he felt that his talent had stood the test of time, his family's reputation, which spanned only 3 generations, was not as well known. Nevertheless, he was confident that the future belonged to him and that he would ascend to greater heights than that of a mere child prodigy. Waver was resolute in his determination to establish himself and prove his worth as a powerful magus. For Waver, the fact that his servant was not heeding his instructions was one thing, but to obstruct his dreams and aspirations was intolerable. Such behavior was, in his view, narrow-minded and ridiculous. As a result, their relationship had deteriorated to a freezing point. Little master, let's buy this great journey game and we'll get a red cloak. Iskandar, wearing a white shirt, grabbed a copy of the Great Journey video game from the department store's game shelf and placed it into Waver's shopping cart. Waver thought to himself, what a joke, the money simply isn't enough, but on the surface, he replied, I have the funds, but why should I assist you in purchasing it? Iskandar took charge of the situation, grasping Waver's head, hoisting him up, and retrieving his wallet. Holding the game in one hand and Waver in the other, they approached the cashier. The cashier, who was responsible for the transaction, was dumbfounded. However, upon seeing Iskandar's massive build, he opted not to say anything and dutifully processed the purchase, even providing a red cloak as part of the deal. Outside the department store, Waver looked at his emptied wallet with a tear of pain. My money, my money! Waver's anger boiled over as he glared at Iskandar, gritting his teeth. Have you no self-awareness? You not only ate all my food, but you also used my money to purchase a game. We are in a war. We are fighting. How much self-awareness do you have? He was frustrated that his servant had used his resources without his consent, and he stomped his foot in anger. Iskandar grinned and said, Stop talking like that, I'll let you play it. Despite Waver's fury, Iskandar appeared unfazed and attempted to ease the tension by offering to let him play the game. Waver's fingers trembled as he glared at Iskandar. You! He exclaimed in anger. He truly despised the muscle-bound brute who had no sense of self-awareness, and the fact that Iskandar wasn't taking his anger seriously only made him angrier. Afterward, they returned to the home of a couple and used suggestions to live there. Iskandar eagerly tore open the packaging of the game, while Waver, still upset, distastefully moved away from him and turned his attention to his book. He wanted to distance himself from Iskandar and whatever the hell he was doing. Little master, how do you play this game? Iskandar asked Waver. There's an instruction manual, can't you read it yourself? Waver curtly replied. But Iskandar insisted, come over here and help me look at it. How do I set it up? Waver thought to himself, this is so annoying. You want me to look, then I must look? What about my dignity? With a frustrated sigh, he said, I don't know. Iskandar pulled Waver over to him, saying, come here and help me look at it. Why are you being so narrow-minded and stubborn? Waver ground his teeth with frustration and exclaimed, is this how you ask for help? You! Sensing Waver's growing agitation, Iskandar handed the instruction manual to Waver and urgently asked, "Hurry up and help me look at it. How do I set this up?" Helpless, Waver assisted Iskandar in looking at the instruction manual and setting up the game. Once everything was in order, he returned to his book, relieved that he could now read in peace. But as he listened to the sound of the game's buttons clicking, Waver found it too loud and turned to remind the Conqueror King to lower the volume. Instead, he saw a scene that almost made him lose his mind. "Are you serious? You're using cavalry to fight tanks? Archers to fight planes?" he exclaimed. "What kind of operation is this? Do you think they're all servants?" Waver was flabbergasted. "My god! What kind of technology tree is this? Archery, woodworking, horse breeding, do you think the world will forever stay in the Middle Ages? Can't you have a little sense of progress? Technology points! Damn technology points!" he ranted. "My god! What are you even trying to do? I seriously doubt if you're really a conqueror king." I can't take it anymore!" Waver shouted. "Get out of my way! If you're going to play like this, without even developing a bomb, what kind of world do you plan on conquering? Watch me create a bomb and destroy the entire world." Despite his outburst, the two of them eventually became fully engaged in the game. "Ha ha ha! I've finally made a bomb!" Iskandar exclaimed triumphantly. "This world will be conquered by me." "Humph! While you were making a bomb, I've already made a spaceship," Waver retorted. Iskandar was stunned. Hey, how did you do it so quickly? Ha ha ha! Don't you know who I am? I am Waver Velvet!" Waver proclaimed proudly. "Take your punishment, Iskandar. Your ambition of conquering the world, I will be the one to break it. Taste my Prometheus cannon." Game over. In the 17th conquest, the Conqueror King was never able to break through the technology blockade and modern strategic layout set up by Waver, the formidable Demon King. "Oh no! I lost again!" Iskandar scratched his head in frustration. Waver stood up and looked down at Iskandar, who was seated on the ground, with an arrogant gaze. Despite Iskandar being taller, even when seated, he declared confidently, "You're still far from it." Wait a moment. Waver slammed his book shut in frustration. "I shouldn't be playing games with him right now. Why did this happen?" he muttered. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! I was too forgiving. This is definitely not right." Iskandar nonchalantly mentioned his grand dream of conquering the world as he scratched the back of his head. It looks like in order to achieve that, I'll need to acquire some nuclear bombs." Waver, back in his sage mode, mockingly retorted, "Humph! If you had that kind of money, you might as well just buy a whole country." Iskandar rubbed his chin as he spoke. "As expected, the root of the problem is money," he acknowledged. "If only I could buy a country as wealthy as Persia, all my problems would be solved." He turned his gaze to Waver, a smile playing on his lips. "But, you're quite talented, little master. If you were born in my era and were a king, maybe we could have a glorious battle." Waver stood tall, patting his chest confidently. "You should know that," he said. "Understand? Your master is truly talented and knowledgeable. You should listen to his commands." Iskandar lifted Waver up and laughed heartily. "But you're still a small-minded brat," he teased. Waver's anger boiled over as he spat out, "You damn!" His eyes shot daggers as he glared at the unenlightened giant of a man. Feeling resentful and bored, he spent the rest of the evening half-heartedly watching TV while listening to the rambling of the elder host family member. Dang! Waver's chopsticks slipped from his fingers and his face filled with shock and disbelief as the news suddenly interrupted the program he was watching. C43. No success? No problem, the opponent is a servant, failure is only natural. Kyrie? He's targeting me? I understand, I'll be careful. Ending the communication with Miri, Kiritsugu adjusted his weapon. Kiritsugu's weapon of choice for killing Magi was a Thompson Contender handgun, produced by the American Thompson Center Weapon Company. It featured a 381mm stainless steel barrel that could match the power of a rifle. Kiritsugu had used magical means to reassemble the handgun, making it one of his most powerful and favorite weapons. Wee woo, wee woo. The sound of police sirens outside grew louder, almost without interruption. Despite the urgency of the noise, Kiritsugu's face remained calm as he continued to adjust his weapons, paying no attention to the commotion outside. However, the next moment, "Kiritsugu, listen to me. You're surrounded. Quickly put down your weapons and surrender, or we'll shoot." A voice shouted from outside. Kiritsugu, who had been adjusting his weapons, paused upon hearing the voice. He moved to the wall, using the curtains to conceal his figure, and peered out the window with a sidelong glance. Kiritsugu could see rows of police cars parked downstairs. The police were divided into two groups, some of them aiming their guns at the window, ready to shoot Kiritsugu on sight if he showed himself, while others aimed at the apartment's front door. What was going on? Did the police catch on to yesterday's operation? Kiritsugu frowned as he surveyed the front and back windows and found that both the front and back doors were already blocked by the police. It was clear that the police were trying to break in and arrest him. Boom! The front door was broken open. It was not a possibility, it was happening right now. Don't move! Kiritsugu, an international terrorist organization criminal. Last night, you carried out a bombing and terrorist attack in our city, you are under arrest. A team of elite police officers trained in forced entry stormed into the apartment, guns drawn and aimed at Kiritsugu, initiating the arrest procedure. Kiritsugu turned to face them, lifting his hands in surrender, but as he attempted to use his Magecraft to influence their minds, he found that their willpower was too strong to be swayed. His Magecraft failed. Not only did he find that the police officers' willpower was too strong to be swayed, but the resulting conflict between their surface and deep consciousness also caused one of the officers, whose willpower was weaker, to lose control of his weapon and start firing at Kiritsugu. The bullets whizzed through the air, and for a human with a physical body, dodging them would have been nearly impossible. However, Kiritsugu possessed a specialized Magecraft called innate time control, which he inherited from his family and stored in a Magic Crest. This Magecraft allowed him to detach a specific space from the flow of time in the outside world and manipulate it to his will. He used this ability to evade the bullet. However, using this type of magic consumed a significant amount of magical energy and required extensive preparation. To effectively utilize it in combat, Kiritsugu confined the boundary affected by the Magecraft to his own body and restricted the duration of manipulation to just a few seconds, allowing the flow of time to have minimal interference with the innate boundary, making it a practical and useful Magecraft in battle. Kiritsugu can exhibit physical capabilities that are impossible for a normal human by increasing blood flow, burning hemoglobin, and muscle movement. That's why he can dodge a bullet. However, the downside is that once the boundary is lifted, the world will make corrections to the time difference between inside and outside the boundary, causing significant strain on Kiritsugu's body. So, Kiritsugu knocks out these police officers before the inherent time control is lifted. Kiritsugu is a complex individual, possessing both a ruthless, calculating nature and a strong sense of morality. He can use any means to achieve his goals and will kill a few people without hesitation for the sake of the majority. Life for him is just a quantity to be weighed on a scale, and he is the one who decides to keep or destroy it. Kiritsugu is unwavering in his convictions, and will not be swayed by the opinions or actions of others. He follows his own sense of justice, regardless of the consequences or backlash. In this particular situation, Kiritsugu chose not to kill the police officers, instead opting to knock them unconscious. He weighed the value of his own life against the lives of the officers and determined that incapacitating them was the most appropriate course of action. On one side of the scale is him, and on the other side are the majority of lives that are trying to capture and shoot him. If it were not for this, he would have already thrown several bombs toward the police officers and bystanders downstairs who were surrounding him. Kiritsugu has no attachment to his own life and would have no qualms about sacrificing himself in order to achieve his goals. However, in this situation, he realizes that his ultimate objective is within reach and he will not let himself be captured or killed before he can achieve it. So he escaped. Kiritsugu believes that Castor is responsible for the police chase and capture attempt. He knows that the police had been under some sort of mind control, which he suspects to be the result of Magecraft. Kiritsugu reasoned that only a powerful and ambitious individual could have the capability and desire to orchestrate such a scheme. He also came to the conclusion that traditional and conservative magi would not take such bold and public actions, which narrowed the list of suspects even further. Taking these factors into account, Kiritsugu ultimately deduced that Castor was the most likely candidate for the mastermind behind the capture attempt. Kiritsugu held a belief that most servants summoned at random possessed personalities that mirrored their masters. Drawing from Castor's performance the previous night, he deduced that his adversary was likely someone with a strategic and decisive personality. Yes. In his view, Shirou's actions during the same night were a calculated and tactical decision, even if Artoria and Dire Muid viewed them as acts of treachery. The discrepancy in perspective between Kiritsugu and knights like Artoria was rooted in their contrasting personalities and values. Unlike the impulsive and chivalrous Artoria, Kiritsugu refrained from hastily drawing conclusions or making rash judgments without substantial evidence, even if he entertained the suspicion that Castor might seek revenge. Kiritsugu assessed the situation cautiously and employed his analytical skills to form educated guesses about the true identity of his enemy. After the incident, Kiritsugu first reached out to Mia and returned to her base. Mia assisted Kiritsugu in removing 3 bullets from his right arm, cleaning and dressing the wounds. Without taking a break, Kiritsugu completed the necessary medical preparations and then, to avoid being recognized, disguised himself in order to investigate the police headquarters. Upon investigating, Kiritsugu discovered that the leaders of the police headquarters had indeed been placed under the influence of suggestion and the perpetrator had already fled. Rather than lifting the suggestion from these leaders, Kiritsugu implanted a suggestion within them to track down clues and leads. Kiritsugu accessed the surveillance footage to search for any suspicious individuals. However, he was surprised to find that all footage from 10:21 to 12:25 had been erased, making it impossible for him to use it as a lead. It was clear to Kiritsugu that the person he was dealing with was also a skilled magus well versed in the ways of the modern world, just like him. Although his investigation yielded no results, Kiritsugu was not discouraged. He had faced many challenges and difficult opponents in his life and was not easily troubled by setbacks. Kiritsugu was able to lift the warrant for his own arrest by implanting a suggestion in the police chief. However, this created a conflict with the fact that he had bombed Fuyuki City. This almost caused the police chief's subconscious to lift the suggestion. To resolve this, Kiritsugu had to guide the suggestion and change Kiritsugu bombed Fuyuki City to someone bombed Fuyuki City, and shift the blame to the magus he had killed before, thus freeing himself from the predicament of being wanted. Kiritsugu also tried to use a reverse suggestion to find out from the police chief who had implanted the original suggestion on him. However, he found that his opponent had already anticipated this move and had used a suggestion to erase the police chief's and other officers' memories of him, making it impossible for Kiritsugu to get any information from them. Kiritsugu's opponent proved to be more formidable than he had anticipated. The opponent had effectively eliminated all possible channels of obtaining clues, making it difficult for Kiritsugu to make any progress in his investigation. This indicated that his opponent was more knowledgeable about the ways of the modern world than him. Kiritsugu believed that among the mostly conservative magi, the one who could make such advanced cognitive moves must be Castor and his master. He left the police headquarters and temporarily returned to Mia's location. As the entire city of Fuyuki now knew that an international terrorist named Emiya Kiritsugu was in town, he had to lay low until the influence of this news subsided. This would limit his movements, but fortunately, even without his active involvement, other masters would be making their own moves. He could use this time to gather information and prepare for his next assassination, particularly focusing on Castor's master. Kiritsugu is more interested in Castor than any of the other servants, including the Night King, Conqueror, and the Golden Servant with multiple noble phantasms. Castor's crafty, treacherous, and unpredictable ways of acting are perfectly suited to Kiritsugu's own methods. Kiritsugu really wants that Castor, but unfortunately, Einsborn had provided him with an extremely incompatible servant in the form of Saber. During this period, Kiritsugu turned on the television, switched to the local Fuyuki channel, and prepared to gather some general information to analyze the situation in Fuyuki City. However, the news being broadcast by the local TV station was so shocking that it made him drop his cigarette in surprise. Because this news. It's too terrible. Attention all citizens, we have received reports that 7 international terrorists have infiltrated the city. It is believed that these individuals are connected to both the recent serial killings in the city and last night's attack by a man known as Emiya Kiritsugu. The wanted individual, Emiya, has been identified by a distinctive red mark on his right hand. Additionally, the other 5 terrorists also possess this same mark. Please be vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the designated hotline immediately. Help us keep our city safe. As Kiritsugu watched himself on the news, with his mugshot prominently displayed, the cigarette slipped from his lips. This is too dirty. Kiritsugu's eyes narrowed with fury as his mind boiled with rage. Being hunted by the authorities and having his mugshot broadcasted was one thing, but for his command seal to be exposed. He glared at the red mark displayed on the television, Kiritsugu was certain that it was his command seal. I'm screwed. Kiritsugu's mind raced with the implications of this revelation. From the moment he saw the news, he knew that something major was about to unfold. The exposure of the command seal itself was not a major concern, but the ramifications of its exposure were truly terrifying. Kiritsugu always approached things with a practical mindset, so that he would not be overwhelmed by worst-case scenarios. But at this moment, the worst outcome he could imagine was sufficient to crush his ideals and shatter his spirit. He considered himself a good person, despite the evil acts he had committed. He couldn't deny the kindness that lay deep within him, even as a man in his 40s, still holding on to the dream of a world where everyone could be happy and fulfilled. This was proof that his heart was both kind and naive. He had combined a pragmatic approach with unsavory methods to try and realize his kind and naive aspirations, which was a contradiction in itself. The most devastating aftermath caused by this news could instantly shatter the justice and ideals of a man named Kiritsugu, the revelation of the mystery. Yes, the most catastrophic outcome Kiritsugu could envision was the exposure of the mystery to the public. This could have severe consequences. In today's era, science has advanced, and many people firmly believe in materialism and atheism. However, the existence of mystery still persists, and even one Messiah has the support of more than 2 billion people who believe in him. The shadow of idealism still lingers over the world, and it has the power to bring about its destruction. The Clock Tower, one of the 3 organizations of the Mages Association, is rumored to possess a weapon that could destroy the world 7 times over. While science and materialism have not yet reached the point where they can completely eliminate the belief in gods and ghosts, the development of nuclear and hydrogen bombs in terms of military power has created a deterrent, and high-energy particle colliders are also increasingly providing insights into the fundamental nature of the world. The physical means of science, which are accessible and understandable to the general public, allow for the exploration of the principles of the universe in accordance with universal laws. Through a spirit of inquisitiveness and a willingness to question established beliefs, the public can gradually gain a deeper understanding of the profound principles of the universe. However, science under materialism is a relatively new development, like a newborn baby that is still growing and maturing. Therefore, science in this world may not be able to defeat mystery, but it can pose a threat to it. So, the pattern of this world is essentially a compromise between the 2 factions. The mystery must be kept hidden from the general public. This is the shared understanding between the 2 factions. If the mystery were to be revealed to the general public, it would lead to a weakening of the power of mystery and may even lead to its eventual downfall. At the same time, the world is also concerned that if the public were to become aware of the existence of extraordinary powers in this world, it would cause panic and chaos, which would be detrimental to maintaining order and promoting the advancement of science. However, the worst-case scenario of this news is that it could lead to a war between the 2 worlds and the general public, although the likelihood of this happening is slim. The Magus community will not stand idly by as the mystery fades away. To preserve the mystery, they will take whatever drastic actions are necessary, even those that Kiritsugu cannot fathom. Similarly, the surface world will also take measures to maintain stability. The war between science and mystery, materialism and idealism, just the thought of the possibility of this war happening causes Kiritsugu to feel suffocated. Who is so cruel? Who is so heartless? Who would selfishly attempt to drag innocent people into their own conflict? Kiritsugu feels an unusual anger, which is at odds with his sense of righteousness. Kiritsugu is willing to kill a few people for the sake of many, even if that includes his relatives and friends. However, the person who exposed the command seal is the opposite of him. They selfishly attempt to drag the general public into their own conflict, without any regard for the consequences. No. It must be stopped. Kiritsugu stood up, his heart filled with a desire to kill. He suspected that this matter had something to do with the master manipulating the police department. The goal was to expand the battlefield and disrupt the war, taking advantage of the chaos to emerge victorious. He knew this because the news of international terrorists appearing in the city was being broadcast on the television station. This kind of news would not appear on a television station unless someone had suggested it to the television station. The use of this familiar method of committing crimes is likely the work of an opponent who is well versed in the laws of the world. Kiritsugu carefully considered the information he had about the master, and the currently known masters are himself, Waver, Kanath, Tosaka, Byakuya, Kaire, and the unknown master of Castor. No matter how he thinks about it, the person most likely to be behind this is the master of Castor. He is a practical person and will not make a hasty determination without solid evidence. He will simply list out all the possible suspects and then eliminate them one by one, starting with the person who has the highest likelihood, that's all. Kiritsugu, I just received a message. The supervisor of the church overseeing the Holy Grail wants to hold a meeting for the masters, Mia said. With everything that's happening, it's strange for the supervisor to remain inactive. I suspect the supervisor might decide to take care of the person who caused this, Kiritsugu said. As Kiritsugu suspected, none of the masters came to the Church of the Holy Grail, all of them sent their servants instead. Kotomine Raisei, the supervisor, strongly condemned this attempt to start a war between the world of Magi and the surface world, then revealed that it was done by the Master of Castor, and offered the command seals left over from the previous Holy Grail Wars as a reward for the masters to hunt down Castor and his master. This was not unexpected for Kiritsugu. The incident had a swift impact on the well-established Tosaka and Matu families in Fuyuki City, as they were the first to feel its effects. Moreover, Kenneth, a clock tower lord, was an unlikely suspect. Kiritsugu's observation from the previous night also led him to conclude that the young master waver lacked the courage to orchestrate such an occurrence. At the time of the incident, Kiritsugu initially suspected himself, considering that such a shameless and cowardly act aligned with the methods employed by a Magus killer like himself. However, Kiritsugu failed to realize that in this particular Holy Grail War, there existed an opponent even more ruthless and morally unscrupulous than him. However, the opponent will have to pay the price for their actions. They will have to face the wrath of 6 angry masters and their servants who will be out to get them. Kiritsugu understood that his opponent was an extremely formidable one, and even the slightest misstep could lead to certain defeat. The possibility that the opponent was in complete control of all that was unfolding was not lost on him. Kiritsugu could not be sure, but he was aware that he had to treat the situation with utmost seriousness. This was because he had come face to face with an adversary even more brutal and merciless than he was. C44. Shirou had used his suggestions on the director of the TV station, compelling them to disclose the command seals to the public. He knew that such actions were highly dangerous and could potentially cause a rift between the two worlds. Initially, he had contemplated using the TV station directly to unveil the mystery but ultimately decided against it due to the potential consequences. Instead, he had opted for a more discreet approach. He was uncertain about the outcome of his actions, but he knew that upon the revelation of the news about the command seals, the supervisor of the Holy Grail War, Raisei, would undoubtedly summon the masters to eliminate him. To mitigate this, Shirou designated Ryu Unosuke as a fall guy. As he made his way home, he pondered his next steps. However, Shirou was taken aback to find his house brightly lit. Could it be a break-in? He hurried back home and was shocked to find his family had returned. Shirou was taken aback. Could the suggestion have been automatically lifted by their own willpower? Shirou, how could you steal money and come back home without a word? Do you have any idea how worried we were? Mrs. Fujimaru scolded him as soon as he walked in. Shirou looked at his mother and saw that her face was teary and worn. Upon seeing her like this, he felt a deep sense of remorse and sadness. It was at this moment that he realized he had underestimated the powerful emotion known as parental love. A family of 4 went out, but their child, born in October, was missing. The power of the subconscious broke the suggestion imposed on the conscious mind. Shirou was despondent, but he knew that there was no other choice. He once again used his suggestion on the Fujimaru couple, retrieved a large plush bear from Sakura's room, and handed it to his parents. Then, he suggested to them, "This is your child, and you will go to Hokkaido for a vacation. You will not return to Fuyuki City until the end of father's vacation. There is nothing left behind, so there is no need to worry." When Shirou first learned suggestion, he had considered using it to move his family away from Fuyuki City. At that time, he believed that the Holy Grail War would not begin for at least 3 months, and he felt no urgency to act. He thought he had time and planned to leave Fuyuki City with his family for a happy vacation after Fujimura's work was finished. In the midst of this economic bubble, finding work is incredibly difficult, thus, Fujimura's abandonment of his job as a result of the suggestion would be a heavy burden for him in his midlife as he would have no job or economic source to support his family. Shirou fully understood this weight. As for whether it was possible to use suggestion to assist his father in finding a job, he didn't even entertain the idea. He knew that suggestion only acted on the conscious mind of the cerebral cortex and could not reach the subconscious. Once reality and memory deviated, the brain would automatically lift the suggestion, rendering it fundamentally useless. He had obediently waited until his father completed his work and the family could travel. However, with the unexpected early start of the Holy Grail War, he no longer had the luxury of time to waste with his family. He was now in the midst of a war, and his priority was to survive. The suggestion was ready to be used, and Shirou was preparing to send his family away from the dangerous situation. Furthermore, he also had to use suggestion on Sakura. But before that, there was something he wanted to know. He wanted to know the reason for the advancement of the Holy Grail War. Shirou was now aware that Sakura was a well-behaved and docile young girl and was certain that she would never run away from home. However, to confirm this, he used suggestion to extract the truth from her regarding her running away from home. Daddy was telling Mommy that I have to be adopted by the Mata family. Mommy was unhappy with it, so she took me and my sister to the temple to burn incense and worship Buddha. An uncle monk answered Mommy's question, and Mommy was no longer upset anymore, but I didn't want to wait for Daddy and Mommy's arrangement. So I run away. What did the monk say? Shirou asked. He said the root of suffering is attachment. Holding on to things will only bring you pain. Letting go of things will bring you peace. Sakura replied. Upon understanding the reason for Sakura's runaway, Shirou used suggestion to guide her and his family to the Shinto subway station and arranged for them to leave Fuyaki City overnight. Shirou then started to walk home. The reason for Sakura's decision to leave home became clear. It was due to her encounter with a monk who was well versed in Buddhism. The two phrases the monk said to her, which seemed to be from a sutra, advised her to let go of her worries and attachments and reach a state of peace and serenity. While this made Sakura abandon her plan to resist Tokyo-me, it also ignited a sense of rebellion within her. Shirou was not interested in delving deeper into the monk's origin, surmising that he likely came from Ryuado Temple and was possibly the father of Ryuado Issei. However, he knew that Ryuado Temple was a dangerous place for him to venture to, as it housed the Greater Grail and had been tainted by evil. His musings were cut short as a loud, ominous crunching noise echoed from a nearby alleyway. Hearing the noise, Shirou quickly turned his gaze towards the alleyway, but without a second thought he made the decision to leave, his body pivoting as he prepared to depart. Shirou knew that the strange noise he heard was something ominous and unsettling. He realized that it would be best to avoid it and not take any unnecessary risks. Shirou firmly believed that safety should always come first and that it was better to err on the side of caution than to regret not doing so later. Furthermore, he knew that being weak was not a problem, but being weak and arrogant was a recipe for disaster. But the next moment a gruesome scene unfolded before him. A blood-covered figure stumbled out of the alleyway, screaming wildly as if she had just witnessed something truly terrifying. Shirou couldn't help but groan inwardly, questioning why he always found himself in these kinds of situations. As he looked down at his own lucky, he couldn't help but reflect on the irony of his situation. Had he not only inherited the abilities of the heroic spirit Emiya but also his misfortune and bad luck? As the blood-covered figure continued to scream, Shirou knew he couldn't just stand there, he had to act. He quickly turned around, not daring to expose his back to an unknown opponent, his mind racing as he prepared to defend himself. Thud thud thud. The ground beneath Shirou began to shake slightly as if a giant were stomping on the ground. Anxiety gripped Shirou's heart as he fused with the Saint Graph and slowly began to retreat. A familiar giant man emerged from the alleyway. The giant was covered in blood and milky fluids, with fragments of organs sticking to his massive body. His face was smeared with blood, and yet he wore a loving smile. He patted the shoulder of the young girl he brought out from the alley. Weakling, the path to freedom is open. Go. Go toward freedom. The young girl in white, also drenched in blood, stared blankly ahead, her gaze empty as if her spirit had been broken. She trembled like a marionette as she walked forward. Seeing the state of this young girl, Shirou couldn't help but close his eyes, the image of her disheveled clothes and the broken hands of the woman who had fled earlier fresh in his mind. He understood, or at least he should have. The hero of the weak is the sword and shield that protects the weak, overthrowing the oppressors who bully and exploit the weak. But in this modern world, the oppressors are not just the ancient heroes of the past, but also the people of today. And especially in the midst of an economic depression, where people are fighting to survive, the poorest places become the most chaotic and lawless. In these dire circumstances, there are an especially high number of vengeful oppressors. Oppression, bullying, and revenge are all born from the pure evil within humans, as they vent their confusion and fear about an uncertain future. These are the people that the sword of the weak, Spartacus, must fight against. They are the enemies that must be overthrown to protect the innocent and the weak. As he approached the entrance of the alley and peered inside, Shirou covered his mouth in surprise. What he saw was a scene of desolation that could only be described as hellish. With an indescribable amount of blood and gore, it felt like a shadow hand was gripping his heart, making his stomach churn and unable to breathe. Spartacus possessed an X-class skill known as Mad Enhancement, which boosted his physical abilities but also caused him to lose control of his reason. In the absence of reason, Spartacus's instincts took over, compelling him to declare, "I am the sword of the weak, the shield of the weak, I will open the path to freedom for the weak." This instinct drove Spartacus to rescue victims and rebel against oppressors, but without reason, he was unable to control this instinct, this kindness. Uncontrolled kindness, in a way, is equivalent to uncontrollable evil. Without the balance of reason, it could lead to unnecessary violence and destruction. No one is purely good, and no one is purely evil. Everyone has a mixture of both qualities, and it all comes down to whether one's reasoning can keep a balance between the two. Even the most vicious bandits can have some redeeming qualities, and even the most virtuous people can have some flaws. Sadly, Spartacus has lost a significant part of his reason, which has made it challenging for him to maintain this balance. His ability to control the boundaries between good and evil has been severely impaired, and as a result, his actions have become increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. Whether it's a mythological hero or a hero of the weak, these so-called heroes are nothing but powerful thugs in today's society. They are violators of the law, destroyers of order, and disturbers of civilization. In reality, modern society has no use for them. Even though many believe that these heroes are merely violent thugs, Shirou couldn't help but make a heartfelt plea to the hero of the weak. "Although I may be weak, can you become my shield and sword? Will you stand with me as I fight for my freedom?" Despite being deemed irrelevant in modern society, the weak still cling to the hero, seeking a glimmer of hope. And the hero of the weak's response is straightforward: "Weakling, I will carve a path toward your freedom." Isn't that obvious? The sword and shield of the weak, even if the reason was lost, his body remembered that he was a hero who defended the weak. How can he refuse to help the weak? Shirou firmly declared, "Let us join forces, with you as my sword and shield, and me as your eyes and mind. Together, we shall live and survive." He reached out and grasped Spartacus' hand. And Spartacus's response was, "Ah!" The stench of oppression and injustice. Spartacus' eyes blazed with love as he turned around, dragging Shirou along with him. "Hey! Hey 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 hey!" Spartacus' grip on Shirou's arm was like iron, his muscle strength and quick movements causing Shirou to be swept along as if caught in a typhoon. Shirou's body was propelled forward. Despite the whirlwind of emotion, an agreement between them was established. The weak had found his sword and shield, and the hero had found his eyes and mind. However, what destiny awaited them as they set forth on this perilous journey? The king, adorned in gleaming golden armor, stood at the top of a tower, surveying all that lay before him. Since the very moment the flame was ignited, he had been a silent observer, carefully monitoring every move, every action. As long as the flame burned and Shirou's journey remained unfinished, the king would keep watching, observing, and waiting. That flame, he too had burned with when he was young. But the flames were different. He was the instrument forged by the gods themselves. Possessing godly strength and wisdom, he was the very embodiment of the divine hero, the beacon of hope that marked the end of the age of gods and the beginning of the age of man. Yet, he defied his divine creators, leading a revolt against the very beings that gave him his power. C4-5. Shirou stood at the entrance of the church, his hair tousled by the sea breeze. He took a deep breath and without a word, turned around and walked back inside. As he made his way through the silent halls, memories of the 3 years he spent studying under Tokyomi flooded his mind. He couldn't help but reflect on the man's teachings, carefully organizing his thoughts and impressions of the man. He was well aware of the hardships that Tokyomi had faced throughout his life. However, the man had silently borne them all and used them as fuel to stoke his own pride. Arrogant and proud, Shirou was all too familiar with this type of person. His own father, Raisei, shared similar traits. For these men, their purpose in life was defined from birth, and they held this belief with unwavering conviction. They never wavered, never hesitated. No matter the situation, they gave it their all to achieve their predetermined goals, with clear guidelines and practical, steel-like willpower. This belief is reflected in both Shirou's father's devout faith and Tokyomi's pride as a noble. The past 3 years spent studying with Tokyomi had a profound impact on Shirou. However, he had come to the realization that he and Tokyomi were incompatible. It wasn't solely due to the similarities they shared with his father, Raisei, but also because they couldn't understand individuals who were lost and struggling without any clear ideals. They were only able to perceive their own ideals. For individuals such as Tokiomi, who possess a strong sense of purpose, Kairei's spirit was entirely devoid of it. Despite being in his 20s, Kairei had never been able to comprehend such a purpose throughout his life. He had never experienced any pursuit that brought him happiness or any form of entertainment that could amuse him. Without such emotions, it was only natural for him to lack a sense of purpose. Kairei couldn't comprehend why his emotions were so detached from the values of the world. He had never found a goal in any field that was worth pursuing and investing his efforts into. However, despite this, he chose to have faith in God. He told himself that maybe it was because he was still immature and didn't know what true goodness entailed. He persisted in his life with the hope that one day he would comprehend the concept of true nobility and be guided by it. He held on to the belief that the voice of a real and divine God would eventually rescue him from his current state of confusion and lack of purpose. This hope was all he had to cling to, like a life-saving straw that kept him afloat in the midst of an uncertain future. However, deep down, Kairei fully understood that even with God's favor, someone like him couldn't be saved. Kairei was consumed by anger and despair towards himself, leading him to engage in self-harm. He attempted to rationalize this behavior as a form of asceticism, but in reality, it was a self-destructive coping mechanism. Despite this, his consistent self-punishment had tempered him like steel. By the time he recognized the extent of his own strength, he had become an elite member of the Holy Church, recognized as an executor. Many individuals referred to this as glory. Kairei's self-denial and commitment to his faith were lauded by others as the pinnacle of a holy profession, and even his father, Raisei, was proud of him. However, Kairei was aware that their perception of him was a huge misunderstanding, and he regretted his inability to correct it. He was aware that there may never be an opportunity in his lifetime to rectify this misunderstanding. Kairei's internal struggle and deeply ingrained personality defects had never been fully understood by anyone, not even the only woman he had ever loved. As Kairei's mind drifted towards his late wife, he felt his thoughts start to wander and his pace slacken. He placed a hand on his forehead as if to steady himself against the emotional turmoil. The haze of turmoil was akin to standing at the precipice of an abyss, and he had to resist the impulse to retreat from the edge. Lost in his thoughts, Kairei found himself back in the basement of the church. The assassin, who had been waiting for him, approached and began to recount the events of the morning. Kairei listened attentively as the assassin delivered the morning's report, and then he distilled the information into a clear, concise summary. He transmitted the report to Tokiomi via their secret device and continued to assist him in achieving the Tosaka family's goals. But despite his dutiful service, Kairei couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness in his heart. A nagging question had been gnawing at him for nearly 3 years, ever since he received the command seals, and it remained unresolved. He couldn't understand why he had been chosen by the Holy Grail. He knew that he should not have been selected, as he had no sense of purpose or ideals, no wishes to make. He couldn't comprehend how such a powerful and miraculous device like the Grail could have been bestowed upon someone like him. Kairei stared at the 3 red marks on the back of his right hand, his expression gloomy and melancholic. Command seals. Oh? Have you fallen into one of your trances again, Kairei? Gilgamesh's voice cut through Kairei's thoughts as he appeared in the basement, holding a glass of red wine and a playful expression on his face. Kairei pushed aside his thoughts and focused on Gilgamesh, his voice steady as he asked, "Why did you kill the assassin last night? Why did you protect that caster? And more specifically, why the boy?" Using shared perception, he was able to gather valuable information from the assassinated assassin last night. "Then why didn't you tell Tokiomi about this?" "I will inform him later," Kairei replied. Gilgamesh sneered and smiled contemptuously at Kairei, then stood up and flung the red wine in his hand at Kairei's face. "Are you awake yet, Kairei?" he asked. Kairei's expression remained calm, even as the wine splattered across his face. He didn't show any sign of anger towards Gilgamesh's insulting behavior. Instead, he simply asked, "What do you mean?" "Don't deceive yourself, Kairei," Gilgamesh said mockingly. "Ever since you obtained this information, you've contacted Tokiomi 3 times, yet you haven't once mentioned it to him. Haven't you realized that yet? Are you being held back by the strict doctrines of your religion or being trapped by a group of mongrels that have limited your ability to discover your true self? You have lost touch with who you truly are, living a mundane existence, becoming the person others want you to be, instead of embracing your true identity." This is why your inner turmoil has grown so chaotic, Gilgamesh said with biting sarcasm. Gilgamesh refilled his glass with wine and then grabbed Kyrie by the collar. The red liquid spilled from Kyrie's head, streaming down his hair and dripping from his face. Drip, drip. Are you awake now? Gilgamesh asked again. I'm not sure what you mean, Kyrie replied, a look of confusion on his face. Gilgamesh laughed, his smile was like a sharp knife, mocking, and sarcastic. Allow me to enlighten you on what can truly satisfy the void in your soul, Gilgamesh said with a smirk. It's called genuine pleasure. Now go, inform that boy's true identity to Lancer's master. Why? Kyrie asked. By embracing chaos, you will discover your true self, Gilgamesh sneered before fading away, leaving Kiri standing there, still confused. C46. Nighttime, at Shirou's house. Shirou fixed his serious gaze on the towering giant, Spartacus, who sat before him on the couch. Listen closely, Spartacus, he began. You are my sword and shield. I, in turn, will act as your eyes and brain. Together, we will protect each other and become invincible. In response to Shirou's words, Spartacus let out an excited, joyful cry of oh 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 oh, and broke out into a broad, loving smile. Shirou was at a loss as to how to react as Spartacus, summoned to the present world, possessed no rationality whatsoever. The only thing that could be confirmed was that the giant would not attack Shirou, and it was impossible for him to exert any control over him. In fact, if Shirou were to harbor such a desire to control Spartacus, he would likely be classified as an abuser and would be attacked by the giant. Nonetheless, even with this limitation, Shirou discovered a way to guide the beast's actions. Spartacus, in order to defeat the greatest abuser in the world, Shirou said with a determined look in his eyes. We must be patient. You must listen to me, and together we will defeat the abuser and fight for the freedom of the weak. Oh 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 oh. Just as the brain controls the limbs, even though rationality was lost, the subconscious of a hero who cared for the weak still remained. This prompted the brain to easily accept Shirou's proposal. Dong dong dong. Spartacus, completely losing control of his rationality, excitedly stomped his feet. The towering, broad giant feet slammed into the ground like heavy hammers. Crack! The floor broke. My house's floor. Shirou felt helpless as he surveyed the destruction around him, the broken walls, doors, water tank, kitchen sink, and wall that had been smashed to pieces when he had come home. It's over. Even if he were to win the Holy Grail War, Shirou knew that he would likely be beaten with a stick and belt by the Fujimaru couple. Damn. The thought reminded him of when he was a kid and hadn't done his homework and the teacher had called his parents. Upon sensing that the magical detector in Ryu Unosuk's possession had been activated, Shirou's expression grew serious as he turned towards the southeast direction. It's finally here. So, who discovered the sacrificial lamb? Shirou shook his head, dismissing the question. The most important thing now was that he needed to play a role. A role for him to slip into the shadows. Kiritsugu was a practical thinker who prioritized strategy over brute force. By meticulously analyzing information, he was able to identify his enemy's weaknesses and strike at their core. He would meticulously peel away layers of information like an onion, pinpoint the location of his enemy's operations, and deliver a decisive blow. He was a model assassin, possessing a rare combination of calmness, courage, and caution. He approached each mission with a clear mind, carefully analyzing the information at hand and considering the logical implications. He then formulated a plan and executed it with precision. The news on TV labeled 7 individuals as international terrorists, but in reality, they were all masters. This showed that Kiritsugu's dirty opponent, the master of Castor, had also turned himself in as a victim. It was a ploy to divert attention and conceal his involvement in the matter. However, Kiritsugu knew that other participants in the Holy Grail War, who possessed even a minimal amount of connection and capability, had likely also gathered relevant information and managed to see through the ploy. Just like how Kiritsugu had been well informed even before arriving in Fuyaki City with the aid of the Einsborn family. He had known that Tokiomi, the Matu family, and Kenneth would be participating as masters in the Holy Grail War. Kiritsugu had come to understand why his opponent would resort to such tactics. The fact that the master of Castor drew attention to himself meant he was akin to a magus with no connections. As Kiritsugu analyzed the situation, he pondered to himself, could my opponent be a rogue magus who was unexpectedly thrown into the mix? Or perhaps, not even a magus at all, but just an ordinary person selected by the Holy Grail? And could these suggestions be coming from Castor himself? These were the questions that raced through his mind as he tried to gain insight into his opponent's motivations and tactics. Kiritsugu was not one to make hasty conclusions before having decisive evidence. Instead, he preferred to list out all possible scenarios, accounting for every possibility that could happen in reality. This method allowed him to avoid being caught off guard by sudden events and to be prepared for any outcome. He always planned for the worst-case scenario and took into consideration all possible outcomes, ensuring that he could act accordingly. There was no denying that Shirou's conclusion was accurate. Kiritsugu's realistic approach to problem-solving made him, in some ways, the most formidable enemy in the Holy Grail War. Mew turned to Kiritsugu and said, "I've heard that the serial killer in Fuyuki City is one of the holders of the command seals. Do you think he could be the master of Castor?" "I'm not sure," Kiritsugu replied, shaking his head. "The news hasn't reported the killer's true appearance. If we have a sample of his hair, we can use Magecraft to try and track him down. Previous reports mentioned that the killer's hair was found at the crime scene and is now stored at the police station," Mew informed Kiritsugu. "I've already been to the police station before," Kiritsugu added, "and this person seems very cautious. I fear that even if there was a sample of his hair before, it may have been destroyed." Shaking his head, Kiritsugu found his opponent both troublesome and dirty. How could this person make such a glaring mistake and leave a clue behind? Despite his reservations, Kiritsugu knew that it was not his style to refrain from taking action due to the possibility of a clue being insignificant. He would not give up until the final result was in front of him, as he never left a job unfinished. Kiritsugu returned to the police station once again, not holding out much hope for finding any new evidence. To his surprise, he discovered that there were still hair and blood samples left. Had Castor and his master overlooked something? Was this a mistake? Kiritsugu knew that this new discovery could be the key to identifying the killer and bringing him one step closer to achieving his goal. Mew was also taken aback by Kiritsugu's unexpected discovery. After a moment's pause, Kiritsugu turned to Mew and asked, "What's your take on this?" "It seems too good to be true, it's obviously a trap," Mew said with certainty. "Even if it's a trap, we have no other choice but to proceed. Allowing that person to continue wreaking havoc would cause a catastrophe far worse than any Holy Grail War," Kiritsugu declared. Kiritsugu didn't venture out alone, instead, he used suggestion to persuade the police force to mobilize and ready themselves for cleanup operations. Though he was uncertain of what Castor's master had in mind, the adversary had imparted a valuable lesson to him. The utilization of the surface world's resources was something he had always overlooked. He was a humble and diligent individual. If the opponent had taught him this tactic and he didn't return the favor, it would be considered very impolite. Without obstruction from any obscuring Magecraft, Kiritsugu swiftly located Ryu Unosuk, who had been discarded by Shirou. Without a word, Kiritsugu fired an origin bullet directly into Ryu Unosuk's abdomen from 50 paces away. The origin bullet was Kiritsugu's truest representation of his origins and name. To create it, he had to undergo a gruesome process. He removed both his first and second ribs on the left and right sides of his abdomen. After the ribs were removed, they were ground into powder, condensed as the bullet core, and sealed into 66 bullets, forming what became known as the origin bullet. The origin bullets, which contained a part of Kiritsugu's soul, materialized his origin of severing and binding upon contact with the target. These bullets had the ability to cripple living creatures upon impact, leaving no visible wounds or bleeding, but causing necrosis to the targeted area or body part. Although the surface of the wound might seem to have healed properly, the nerves and capillaries would never regenerate correctly, resulting in permanent loss of the original function. Furthermore, the origin bullet, being a conceptual weapon, posed an even greater threat to magi who possessed magic circuits that mimicked nerves. Upon impact, the bullet could disrupt the functioning of those circuits, causing them to malfunction. The origin in the origin bullet could have a severe impact on a magus's magic circuit, potentially causing it to short-circuit and resulting in them running wild and completely destroying the circuit. This not only caused damage but also left the magus unable to use Magecraft permanently. The extent of the damage caused by the origin bullet depended on the timing of impact and the number of magic circuits activated by the target. This was because the damage was caused by the magus's own magic. As a result, this bullet could effectively destroy even powerful magi who activated many magic circuits, making it a highly effective weapon in Kiritsugu's arsenal. Before arriving in Fuyuki City, Kiritsugu had already used 37 of his 66 origin bullets, and each one had been used effectively. Using bullets made from his own body, he had completely destroyed 37 magi, showcasing the devastating power of the origin bullet. It could be said that this bullet was the best embodiment of Kiritsugu as a Magus killer, and it played a significant role in his success as a deadly assassin. While the origin bullet had exceptional power in taking down magi, it was just a regular bullet with no added killing power when used on ordinary people. However, it was impossible for the origin bullet to be ineffective in the Holy Grail War. This was because the source of a servant's magical energy came from their master, and from the moment of summoning, the master's magical energy was continually transferred to the servant, making them susceptible to the origin bullet. Therefore, when this bullet hit a master, the master inevitably suffered a backlash. The master of caster possessed strong magical energy, almost to the point of leakage. This meant that the special attack of the origin bullet against him would be particularly severe, possibly causing his body to explode. Kiritsugu had already witnessed this outcome in the past, but to his surprise, the master of caster, despite his strong magical energy, stood up again, showing no signs of any of his magic circuits being destroyed. What's going on?" Kiritsugu exclaimed in surprise. C47. Although Ryu Unosuke wasn't a fan of violent and bloody movies, he recognized their significance as a form of entertainment. He believed that these types of films, including horror, war, disaster, and adventure movies, all shared a common obsession with depicting human death. He thought that perhaps it was because through fictionalized death, viewers could safely confront and mitigate their fears. Humans took pride in their intelligence and often feared the unknown, but with understanding came the ability to conquer fear. However, death was one thing that could never truly be understood while alive. So, helpless humans could only try to understand the nature of death by observing others' deaths and simulating the experience. In civilized societies, human life was highly respected, and death was often only experienced through fictional means. But in war-torn regions, where death was a constant reality, people did not seek out horror movies for entertainment. Similarly, fictional entertainment could play a role in helping people understand and overcome the misfortunes of life, such as physical pain and mental pressure. By experiencing these things vicariously through fictional characters, individuals could gain a better understanding of them and reduce their fears. This was why movie and television screens were often filled with scenes of sorrow, pain, and suffering. By observing and understanding these emotions, people could learn to cope with them in their own lives. Therefore, viewers also often felt that death and difficulties were not as daunting when they saw themselves as the protagonist in these works, who was able to overcome death and difficulties. Ryu Unosuke used to be like many people, constantly filled with the fear of death. However, he always found the graphic depictions of corpses and blood in horror movies to be inauthentic and cheesy. It occurred to him that if simply watching these movies could truly conquer his fear of death, then he would have been a fan of the genre a long time ago. Ryu Unosuke possessed a keen ability to discern the reality of death from fiction. He found the horror stories and movies to be ridiculous and shallow, unable to truly capture the essence of death. He believed that the true nature of death could not be experienced through mere entertainment. This perception may have been influenced by his father, who was crushed by reality and alcoholism. Ryu Unosuke's father, in a fit of drunken rage, inflicted his spite on his own son. When Ryu Unosuke was just 6 years old, he was strung up on a tree and subjected to a brutal beating that lasted for an entire day and night. Despite his inability to feel physical pain, Ryu Unosuke experienced the true horror of the world and the true meaning of death through this traumatic event. This experience left Ryu Unosuke fixated on the feeling of death, the only thing that gave him a sense of true and eternal meaning as someone without sensation. So, in the dead of night, he took a knife and delivered 3 fatal cuts to his father's neck. As his father awoke and clutched at the wounds, Ryu Unosuke watched the blood flow but was not punished for his actions due to the laws regarding juveniles at the time. Ryu Unosuke's obsession with the feeling of death led him to understand his purpose and the means to make his world feel real. He became devout in his beliefs, respecting and pursuing the eternal truth he had found. He wanted to share this truth with others, much like when he was 12 and shared it with his beloved sister, who was the first person he wanted to experience this ultimate truth. Ryu Unosuke, despite being a loving person with a broad mind, was viewed by others as a ruthless killer. Strangely enough, he took pride in this perception, seeing it as the ultimate compliment. Over time, his hunting techniques became more and more sophisticated, spanning the entire country. No one was able to catch him or escape his grasp, fueling his arrogance and sense of superiority. However, everything changed when he met a red-haired boy. Ryu Unosuke had made a mistake, and as a consequence, he was captured by the red-haired boy. Through a cunning technique, the boy manipulated Ryu Unosuk's mind, causing him to believe that he was someone who valued life. No! Ryu Unosuk's subconscious screamed. I have stolen, destroyed, and killed. I have nothing else, so don't try to strip away my only sense of reality. However, the method Ryu Unosuk used was quite clever. His mind deceived his brain, evoking memories from before he was 6, causing a struggle between his subconscious and conscious mind. The false and the real, the subconscious and the conscious fought against each other, causing him immense pain and confusion. And at this time, Kiritsugu's origin bullet hit him. The process of severing broke the suggestion, but also, due to the binding, it repaired his neurological defects. He awoke, but the once painless person now experienced pain for the first time. Pain. So much pain. So much pain. For the first time in his life, Ryu Unosuk felt pain as he was hit in the abdomen with the origin bullet. The process of destruction and repair was intense, causing him to sweat profusely and contort his face in agony. The experience left his mind in a state of disarray. When Shirou arrived on the scene, he witnessed the police rushing in and then saw Ryu Unosuk, who had snatched a gun from one of the officers and was now pointing it at his own jaw. With a loud bang, Ryu Unosuk pulled the trigger, and the bullet penetrated his jaw, causing a mixture of brain matter and blood to flow out of the wound. Shirou was taken aback by the turn of events, though it seemed reasonable. However, after everything was said and done, he glared at Kiritsugu with anger and exclaimed, "How dare you launch a surprise attack on my master?" Kiritsugu remained unfazed. The appearance of Castor was one of the scenarios he had taken into consideration, and it was a plausible one. He didn't hesitate to use his command seals to summon Artoria. Shirou witnessed Artoria appearing before Kiritsugu through the use of command seals, seemingly teleporting across time and space. As he did, he realized that Kiritsugu was now invulnerable and could not be killed. Ryu Unosuk's death was necessary to announce that Castor had been defeated. Shirou also needed someone to help him spread the news, otherwise, he would not be able to escape the consequences from both worlds. Kiritsugu was the perfect candidate for this task. Shirou turned his gaze towards Artoria and spoke in a confrontational tone, "Is this what you call righteousness, King of Knights? Your master attacked and bombed my home last night, causing me to flee my workshop, as my heroic nature would not permit me to watch innocent people get caught in the crossfire. And now, he is employing secular power to compel me to relinquish the defense of my workshop and launch a surprise attack on my master. Can you explain this? Is all of this because I was concerned about keeping the mystery hidden? Is this your notion of righteousness simply because I have compassion in my heart and was concerned about not endangering innocent civilians?" Shirou questioned Artoria with a tone of frustration. "King of Knights, is this what you consider to be righteousness?" "No, it's not, Castor." Artoria tried to say something, but Shirou interrupted her. You. Shirou clutched at his chest, stumbled backward, and fell into the nearby river. Then he dissolved his Saint Graph to create the illusion of defeat, his voice echoing in the air, "You shameless woman!" Castor. Artoria reached out, her face twisted with discomfort. Her sworn opponent, whom she had pledged to defeat honorably, had been eliminated because of her master's dishonorable actions. Her oath had been mercilessly trampled upon. Kiritsugu, however, remained calm and said, "Well done." Feeling guilty and ashamed, Artoria bowed her head and clenched her fists. I didn't do anything." Kiritsugu gazed at Artoria with eyes as emotionless as the Dead Sea. "That's why I said you did well." "Why?" Artoria looked up at Kiritsugu, her blue eyes filled with anger. "Why did you do this? Don't you trust me? Don't you trust your sword? Why would you do something so dishonorable?" she asked, her voice tinged with hurt. Kiritsugu took a drag of his cigarette as he spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Saber, you're too straightforward. You don't understand the complexity and ugliness of human hearts. Castor's words were a clear attempt to divide us before his defeat, and it was unnecessary because you and I were never compatible. Besides, even if I did something dishonorable, so what? I have a conscience. Do you? What? To protect one thing, you must hurt another. Do you have that kind of conscience? One who refuses to relinquish anything cannot change anything." Kiritsugu snuffed out his cigarette and began to depart, leaving behind a final statement, "I don't disapprove of your principles, but they impede my mission. If you're not willing to sacrifice everything and hurt anyone, then just live your life, let me handle the rest." The master spoke in a manner that was completely dismissive of the servant's words. Artoria was so incensed that she could hardly keep her sword steady in her hand. Artoria clenched her fist. What should I do? As the sun rose, Shirou returned home and removed his disguise. From then on, everyone will know that the servant known as Castor had retired and nobody knew that master known as Shirou had entered the picture. He returned to the police station to tie up any remaining loose ends and was surprised to find that Ryu Unosuk was still alive. The bullet that passed through Ryu Unosuk's jaw and into his brain should have killed him, but due to Kiritsugu's bullet's healing properties, he survived. However, the bullet remained lodged in his brain, rendering him unable to speak or move properly, and potentially affecting his self-awareness. The serial killer, who had been chasing death his entire life, made only 3 mistakes in his killings. The first mistake was with his father, the second was targeting Shirou, and the third and final one was himself. Paralyzed and unable to communicate, the death-chasing killer teetered on the brink of death but was unable to die. His final demise left him in this state. It was uncertain whether this was his ultimate wish granted by his own hand or his own wish destroyed by his own hand. Shirou didn't know for sure, but he knew that he could still make use of Ryu Unosuk again. C48. The master of Castor was killed by Kiritsugu's gun, and Castor was defeated. This news spread through the words of Kotomine Raisei. Upon hearing this news, the other masters, despite their different personalities, had almost the same reaction. It was that dishonorable murderer who snuffed out the child's life? The notion of those vile hands tarnished with innocent blood doesn't truly surprise me. Tokyomi's voice echoed through the device. Kaire, keep utilizing assassin to monitor the other master's movements. I understand, teacher. Kaire switched off the device. Perhaps the man who had etched the pride of the Magi into his bones truly carried a curse in his blood. Tokyomi was always on the right path and his preparation was always thorough, but in critical moments, he always inexplicably overlooked some details that should not have been ignored. For example, at present, he unconsciously assumed that the slain master of Castor was the child, without even verifying it. If Kaire were in Tokyomi's position, he would have painstakingly investigated this matter, but Tokyomi's unexplainable negligence was akin to a curse. Kaire sat on the chair, picked up the Book of God, and read the virtues within its pages: generosity, perseverance, honesty, loyalty, diligence, justice, patience. As he recited these virtues, Kaire's confusion only deepened. He was Tokyomi's disciple and had agreed to serve him before the war, but he kept this information hidden. He had even confirmed that Castor had not withdrawn, but he did not inform Tokyomi, or even his father, and instead allowed his father to announce Castor's withdrawal. This was wrong. Kaire realized that his actions were in violation of his duty as a priest, as they went against the laws of God, the teachings of his parents, and the expectations of his associates. However, he couldn't understand why he had felt compelled to hide the truth. What was driving these conflicting emotions within him? As Kaire struggled with his confusion, the words of Gilgamesh echoed in his mind: go reveal the truth about that boy to the mongrel master of Lancer. Kaire had lost faith that God could save him, but he wondered if perhaps that king could. He didn't know if he could save himself from this chaotic, false, and meaningless world, but he was willing to try. If God could not save him from drowning, he would struggle to reach the shore on his own. Kenneth L. Meloy Archibald was a man of unwavering integrity. In his youth, no matter what the challenge was, he always found a way to solve it better than anyone else. His efforts were not driven by a desire to stand out, but rather by his belief that his research was superior to that of others. As a result, he was widely considered a genius. Kenneth had earned his title of genius and there was no one who doubted it or threatened it, so he didn't feel the need to be prideful or arrogant, instead he just accepted it as a natural part of who he was. In his world, Kenneth was the unquestioned lord. He had never encountered any obstacles and had no concerns about limitations. With his natural talent and being the legitimate son of a prestigious family, he not only inherited the magical achievements passed down through generations but also possessed a rare talent that perfectly complemented them. Later on, as he worked at the clock tower, Kenneth stood out among his peers with numerous outstanding research achievements. He garnered admiration and envy from others, but he never felt a sense of satisfaction or accomplishment. For Kenneth, it was just an inevitable result of his life. Kenneth's talents and achievements led him to easily become one of the 12 lords of the clock tower, the leader of the El Meloy faction, and the head of the Archibald family. Furthermore, he was betrothed to Sola Uinuitari Sophia Ri, the daughter of his mentor. Kenneth's life was one of talent and privilege, without any obstacles or setbacks. He was born to be envied by mortals. This was true in the past and would be true in the future. It was a sacred and unchangeable lifestyle that Kenneth took for granted. Therefore, if there were any rare and almost impossible accidents that disrupted this order, it was chaos that he couldn't tolerate and an insult to his honor. Waver Velvet, a detestable thief, stole the holy relic of the Conqueror King that was prepared by him. Despite being a member of the aristocratic faction, Kenneth was surprised to discover that his student had developed a heretical idea that denies the theory of bloodline superiority. If not for his noble family background, Kenneth would have suspected Waver Velvet to be some kind of troublemaker sent by rival lords to disrupt the aristocratic faction. Kenneth realized that if the information in Waver's thesis were to be made public, it would likely lead to his death at the hands of the aristocratic faction. However, he reasoned that this was not a significant concern, as the clock tower had seen many students meet their end for delving into forbidden knowledge. Despite this, Kenneth knew that publishing the thesis under his own name would attract unwanted attention and suspicion from other aristocratic families, and would ultimately harm his reputation. Thus, he resolved to destroy the thesis, which also incidentally saved the student's life. However, the student did not stop there, as he also stole Kenneth's relic and used it to summon the Conqueror King to participate in the Holy Grail War. But Kenneth remained unfazed by the student's theft, as he was confident in his abilities and believed that the other participants in the Holy Grail War, including a group of rural magus, a dishonorable killer, and a mediocre student, were no match for him. He was certain of his victory. Kenneth's confidence was not arrogance, but a belief in his own abilities. However, at this time, he received something that caught his interest. A master who can make the servant possess his body? Does such a physique really exist, Master of Assassin? Kenneth questioned, intrigued. As he glanced over at Kyrie, who had infiltrated his workshop and revealed the truth about Castor to him, Kenneth added, moreover, even if Castor did possess this rare physique, he has already been slain by Saber's master. Lord El Meloy, given your deep knowledge of spirit theory, did you not detect anything unusual about Castor's aura? Inquired Kyrie. Perhaps, Kenneth replied with a chuckle. In truth, he had noticed it well before Kyrie had arrived, even on the first night. Otherwise, how could he have arranged for Lancer to chase and kill Castor? Given his position as a first-class lecturer in spirit theory and director of the Department of Spiritual Evocation, it was only natural for Kenneth to be intrigued by the possibility of a rare physique that could allow a person to fuse with servants. Once known, it would become a target of sealing designation. Considering that such a physique would be considered precious material for studying the heroic spirit system, it would be difficult for Kenneth not to take notice of it and desire it for his own research. Thank you for sharing this news with me. As a token of my gratitude, I would like to extend an invitation for you to stay here. Let me take care of you and ensure that your stay is as comfortable as possible, Kenneth said, as he gestured with a snap of his fingers, activating the various enchantments throughout the high-class hotel that he had transformed into his magical workshop. I am fully aware that entering a magus's workshop without permission can have deadly consequences. I understood this a long time ago, Kyrie said with a calm expression. He then gestured towards the window, but before that, I would like Lord El Meloy to take a moment to look outside. Oh? Are you trying to distract me? It's a futile effort. Your assassin is no match for my lancer in direct combat, Kenneth laughed, his confidence in his servant unwavering. For Kenneth, defeating an opponent who is bound to lose is nothing but a matter of course. No, I simply want to inform Lord El Meloy that your fiancé is currently in the custody of my assassin, Kyrie said calmly. What? Kenneth's previously composed demeanor quickly vanished as he turned his head upon hearing Kyrie's words. And true to Kyrie's statement, he saw his fiancée Sola held captive by assassin, bound and perched on the edge of a nearby high-rise building, with the threat of being pushed off at any moment. Dash, dash. With his face now ashen and voice filled with gloom, Kenneth turned his gaze back to Kyrie and spoke through gritted teeth, dash despicable. I agree with Castor's words, Kyrie said. In war, there is no such thing as a dishonorable tactic. Lord El Meloy, aren't you also planning to kill me and keep me quiet? Kenneth's expression wavered, and he said, release Sola and I'll let you go. I find it difficult to trust the words of a magus. It would be best for you to let me leave first and I will have assassin release your fiancé. I am a priest, acting in the name of God. My words are trustworthy. You can choose to believe me or not, but that means we'll stand here, with your fiancé being held hostage by assassin indefinitely. Kyrie said. Kenneth's expression wavered as he weighed his options. Kenneth! Kenneth! Sola cried out in fear and desperation. Fine. All right, all right. I'll let you leave first, but you must return Sola to me unharmed. Otherwise, I swear to you, in this Holy Grail War, I want nothing else but your life. Kenneth threatened, his words reflecting the intensity of his emotions. Please rest assured, once I am gone, Assassin will automatically release your fiancé. I am a priest, acting in the name of God. Kyrie reassured. Kenneth allowed Kyrie to leave, and true to his word, Kyrie ordered Assassin to release Sola from captivity. As Kenneth rushed to rescue Sola, his face was filled with genuine concern. Sola, are you injured? Is there anywhere that hurts? He asked with worry etched across his features. No. With his heart slightly relieved by Sola's safety, Kenneth then turned to Diarmuid and scolded him with a tone of anger. Lancer, how could you have not noticed anything when Sola was being kidnapped by Assassin? My lord, I apologize, Diarmuid replied, bowing his head in sincere remorse. Though, it was true that Kenneth had called him away to spiritualize in preparation for plotting against Kyrie, causing him to be absent when Sola was kidnapped. Sola approached Diarmuid and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Please don't blame yourself, Diarmuid, she said, her voice soft and reassuring. Kenneth was the one who plotted against that member of the Holy Church, not you. You were just following orders. Besides, look at me now, I'm alive and well. Let's not dwell on it anymore. Kenneth's face turned ashen. Diarmuid let out a deep sigh, his eyes looking out the window. Despite destroying his own appearance and physically cutting off the tear-like mark, the curse still lingered. He couldn't escape it. Would he ever be able to escape his cursed fate? Kyrie panted heavily as he sprinted back to the underground church, his hands pressing against the wall for support. What is this feeling? He muttered to himself, confusion etched on his face. He had just witnessed Kenneth's expression change and heard him berate himself for his own miscalculation. An overwhelming and unfamiliar emotion flooded Kyrie's heart, bringing with it a sense of pleasure and joy. But the action that had caused this feeling was not good. It was betrayal, cowardice, oppression, it was sin, something that everyone would disapprove of. It was evil. Gilgamesh strode into the underground church, his ever-present goblet clutched in his hand, the inviting aroma of red wine wafting from it as he took a sip. He turned his gaze to Kyrie and asked, why did you not let Assassin eliminate that mongrel when you were escaping? God has said, be patient and have integrity, Kyrie began to reply, but before he could finish his sentence, Gilgamesh abruptly stood and flung the contents of his goblet at Kyrie's face, leaving him dazed. Are you awake now? Are you going to continue struggling in the false prison fabricated by humanity, or will you go out and see the pitiful chaos for yourself? The clearer the water, the muddier the sand at the bottom. The choice is yours. But I think your patience is also nearing its limit. Gilgamesh laughed before turning and leaving Kyrie alone. Kyrie stood there dazed, feeling a confusing mix of pain and numbness, both clarity and confusion. He picked up the Book of God and began reciting the virtues listed within it: generosity, perseverance, honesty, loyalty, diligence, righteousness, patience. The more he read, the less meaning the words held for him. He closed the book and slammed his head against the wall in frustration. Bam! 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 Hot blood flowed along his skin, trickling down from his forehead. Tick! 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 Kyrie's gaze was blank as he struggled with his thoughts. He longed to know his true self, to experience reality, and to find purpose in his life. But who could give him these things? Who could show him reality? Who could rescue him from this never-ending fog? Kyrie was confused, disoriented, and uncertain. Tick! 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 The hot blood left a trail on his face and dripped onto the holy book of God that lay open on the ground. God says, people should strive to do their best and be the best versions of themselves. Take it. Thank you, big brother, the little girl exclaimed as she accepted the red balloon that had been snagged in the treetop. She beamed a grateful smile at the golden-haired older brother, who had come to her rescue. Despite his gruff demeanor, he had assisted her in retrieving the balloon. He was a genuinely kind older brother. Gilgamesh, dressed in casual attire, walked away, but then turned back and gestured towards the red balloon, making a playful pong noise. Pop! The balloon burst. c4-9. As night fell on the third day, Shirou cast aside his caster guise and resolved to take the fight to his opponent. But before he could launch his attack, he needed a new disguise. Caster had worn an Ultraman leather jacket and a black cloak, but Shirou had a different persona in mind. He would pose as the master of Berserker, Spartacus, and to do that, he needed an appropriate outfit. After browsing a department store, Shirou found what he was looking for, a Kamen Rider Zo leather suit. This show was released on 1993, and was still popular at the time. Shirou found it more affordable than the Ultraman jacket and used some of his special funds to cover the cost. Shirou knew he owed a debt of gratitude to Iskandar, who had provided him with the financial support he needed to buy the suit. Iskandar had taken a hefty sum of 50,000 yen from Waver, a significant amount in 1993. Shirou couldn't help but wonder how Waver had managed to restrain himself from killing Iskandar after that. He had chosen the Kamen Rider Zo leather suit as his new disguise, and it was primarily blue in color, resembling a beetle. The suit's red compound eyes only enhanced this effect, making Shirou appear even more like a member of the Matu family. This realization was all the more unsettling to him, given his long-held belief that the Matu family was obsessed with bugs. Shirou knew that first impressions could be powerful, and this appearance was sure to have an impact. With Spartacus by his side, Shirou set out from his home, ready to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. The Berserker team was planning to cause trouble, with a powerful servant and a cunning master in their midst, Spartacus and Mad Shirou. The weak have been given swords and shields, while the mad heroes have been given eyes and brains. With this complementary combination, they're invincible. Shirou considered his options, wondering whether he should pay a visit to the Tosaka residence and stir up trouble, perhaps even getting under the skin of that arrogant golden servant. But after some contemplation, he decided against it. Instead, he focused his attention on his third most hated target, Dire Muad Ueduabitni. At the top of Shirou's list of hated individuals was Gilgamesh, who had forced him into the Holy Grail War, followed closely by Kiritsugu, who had almost sent him to the heavens. Gilgamesh was the only one who knew Shirou's true identity, and Shirou was well aware that even Spartacus might not be able to defeat him. He had seen firsthand how Gilgamesh had dealt with Spartacus in the past, once by overpowering him with a giant sword, once by trapping him with shields, and once again by using a giant sword. Shirou knew that if he were to bring Spartacus to a fight against Gilgamesh, it would be a complete defeat. As for Kiritsugu, his whereabouts were unknown. Even if they were to attack the castle of Einsburn, there was no guarantee that Spartacus's physical body could withstand Saber's noble phantasm. In the end, Dire Muad seemed like the best option. Unlike Gilgamesh and Saber, he had no anti-fortress noble phantasm or bug abilities, relying solely on his strong martial arts skills. This made him a formidable opponent, but one who could be defeated. For Shirou, he was the ideal hunting target. Most importantly, Shirou had nearly lost his life twice at the hands of Dire Muad, so he felt a strong desire for revenge. With these thoughts in mind, Shirou led Spartacus towards Kainith's workshop, disguised as the Kamen Rider and posing as Mad Shirou. But upon arriving, they found that Kainith was not present in the International Hotel's magical workshop. His materials and belongings were still there, but the man himself was nowhere to be found. In frustration, Shirou and Spartacus caused a ruckus, destroying all the magical items in the workshop before leaving with Spartacus. Suddenly, Shirou sensed the presence of a servant lurking around him and a gaze watching him, and his brow furrowed in response. But a hint of a mocking smile played at the corners of his mouth. Did they still think he was the weak caster of the past, who could only boast and bluster? It was time for these servants to see just how powerful he had become. "Come, Spartacus," he shouted, his voice filled with determination. "The oppressors are here. Let's defeat them together." "Oh oh 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 oh!" Spartacus in his spiritual body let out a cry. Shirou chose a sparsely populated suburban forest as the battlefield. He allowed Spartacus to materialize while he stood at a safe distance, waiting for the enemy to arrive. He knew that he couldn't defeat servants on his own, but as a master, he could use the strength of his demi-servant to bully the Magus. However, he decided not to fuse with his Saint Graph immediately. He had two reasons for this decision. First, once he fused his Saint Graph, the servant's aura, particularly Wisdom of Mortal, would reveal his identity. Second, he wanted to use the enemy's arrogance to his advantage. By waiting until they thought they had won, he could catch them off guard and increase the chances of killing them directly. This was the true way of assassination. Boom boom boom. The sky was filled with thunder and lightning, and a chariot rode on blue thunderbolts, landing in front of Shirou and the others with the force of a meteor. Shirou's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at the grand figure on the chariot. He had not expected to attract the attention of Iskandar, one of the most powerful servants. The heroic figure materialized as Berserker. "Are you the one calling out to this king?" Iskandar asked with a smile as he looked at Spartacus. "Are you willing to join under my banner?" "It's a shame, Conqueror King," Shirou spoke on his behalf, "my Berserker has no fondness for rulers. He is a symbol of freedom." "Oh." Iskandar's gaze shifted to Shirou, noting the Kamen Rider suit he was wearing. He raised an eyebrow and asked with interest, "Berserker's master, is that outfit you are wearing the clothing of this country?" Shirou nodded, saying, "It's something like that." In his mind, this suit was also from Japan, so it could be considered Japanese clothing. "It's pretty good," Iskandar said, stroking his chin and showing an interested expression. He then turned to look at Waver, who was standing beside him. Waver cowered like a scared cat, protectively covering his pocket and glaring fiercely. "I'm telling you, I'm broke. I'm broke. Don't even think about it. This is wartime. Who has the mind to join the war carelessly like you? Look at Berserker, he's giving you an evil eye. Don't think about attacking my wallet. Oh my! You're so petty." Iskandar patted Waver's shoulder with a carefree expression, pointing at Shirou and Spartacus, and laughed cheerfully. "Who knows, today's enemy might be tomorrow's friend. That's just your way of thinking. They came here with the intention of killing us." Waver shouted with a gloomy expression, but his words were met with loud laughter from Iskandar. Shirou's gaze was intense as he looked at Iskandar, taking note of his large heart and generous attitude. But even so, Shirou couldn't deny the fact that he himself had come with the sole intention of taking their lives. He knew that in this deadly game, there was no room for mercy. If he didn't kill his enemies, they would kill him. So he steeled himself for the battle ahead, knowing that he could not afford to show any weakness or hesitation. Shirou shouted, "Spartacus, let's go!" Spartacus, wielding a razor-sharp sword and radiating determination, charged towards Iskandar like a fierce god. His muscular form towered over the battlefield. Boom, boom! Spartacus's bulky frame began to pound the ground as he ran, each step causing the earth to tremble beneath him. "Did you see that?" They didn't even consider. Waver was about to berate Iskandar for his naivety, but when he saw the king's expression, he was taken aback. Iskandar was laughing, a joyful smile on his face. "Excellent! The shining star of rebellion, illuminating the earth. You are rising up against the true oppressor, the king who seeks to conquer and subjugate the entire world, Iskandar." Iskandar unsheathed his long sword and laughed as he pulled the reins of his chariot, the Gordius wheel. In the next instant, it roared to life like divine thunder, hurtling towards the charging Spartacus. Boom! Iskandar held the reins of the Gordius wheel, guided by the power of two divine bulls, as it collided with Spartacus with tremendous force. In an instant, Spartacus was sent flying, his bones cracking as he was thrown. His burly body was covered in scorch marks from the intense strikes of lightning. Seated on his chariot, Iskandar brandished his sword and shouted, "Rise up, shining star of rebellion! If you fall now, then accept the tyranny of this king." Oh 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 oh! Spartacus rose to his feet, his presence growing stronger with each passing moment. His bones realigned with a series of cracks, his burly frame expanding even further, his muscles bulging like mountains, making others feel insignificant in comparison. Spartacus let out a wild laugh, brandishing his long sword like a hero of retribution. Charging toward the greatest sinner in the world, his spirits high, he bellowed, "Oppressor, oh 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 oh! That's right, I am an oppressor, a tyrant. My kingdom is built on tyranny, and oppression is my greatest achievement." Iskandar laughed as he pulled the reins of the chariot, which in an instant was covered in thunderbolts and lightning pillars, charging towards Spartacus with great force. With a deafening roar, the giant and the divine chariot collided in a blaze of magical energy and thunderbolts. The two forces intersected and surged, creating a powerful storm of destruction that filled the air. In an instant, the space around them seemed to freeze, as if time itself had been suspended in the face of such raw power. Boom! A sound like thunderclaps echoed out as the two forces collided, creating a storm that was like a typhoon erupting at the point of intersection. The surrounding trees and grass were lifted 3 feet high, caught up in the powerful winds generated by the collision, like a tidal wave. The scene was one of utter destruction, as the earth shook and the sky blackened, consumed by the raging storm of magical energy and thunderbolts. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being torn asunder by the sheer force of the battle. This time, Spartacus was not sent flying as he expanded even more, his body now able to withstand the crushing force of the Gordius wheel. Iskandar was taken aback, but he spoke with excitement. To be able to withstand the crushing force of my Gordius wheel with just your flesh and blood is truly impressive. But my Gordius wheel is not so easily withstood. Iskandar laughed and swung the reins again, calling forth even more power from his chariot. Mao! The two divine bulls raised their heads and let out a long cry, exerting even more strength and their bodies becoming even more thunderous, like a clap of thunder crashing towards Spartacus. The overwhelming power of the Gordius wheel slowly pushed towards Spartacus, the thunder around the war chariot lashing at him like a whip, leaving behind numerous wounds. Spartacus clung to the heads of the two divine bulls with his hands, but his body was gradually forced back by the power of the Gordius wheel. His huge feet were like bulldozers, destroying a piece of farmland. No. This won't do. Shirou quickly realized that although Spartacus became stronger as he sustained injuries and was skilled in counterattacks, the crushing force of the Gordius wheel was too fast for him to keep up. Shirou feared that Spartacus would be crushed by the wheel before he could unleash his full power. Support. The hands that wield the sword and shield require the support of his brain and eyes. Shirou's expression grew serious as he looked at Waver on the Gordius wheel. Afraid of being recognized, he projected a spear instead of a sword. With a wave of his hand, Shirou projected a spear and it materialized in a flash of light, hurtling towards its target. Dash dash! Hearing a strange sound of breaking air, Waver quickly turned his head and saw a spear rushing towards him, the sight almost scaring him out of his wits. Just as the spear was about to strike him, Iskandar swiftly waved his hand and his sword split Shirou's projected spear into two, the shattered pieces of the spear falling harmlessly to the ground, then disintegrated. Waver breathed a sigh of relief, but then turned to Shirou with a glare. Sneak attacking me? Is that how you fight? Before Shirou could respond, Iskandar interjected. He placed a hand on Waver's shoulder and chuckled. Relax, kid. This is war. Things are different here. Waver was furious that his own servant was helping someone else speak against him. Seeing that Iskandar didn't even bother to get angry at him and instead had a carefree and cheerful laugh, Shirou didn't let it affect him either and continued to project various weapons as they materialized in a flurry of light, raining down upon Waver in a relentless barrage. Waver was overwhelmed by the constant stream of projectiles, and in fear, he sought refuge behind Iskandar. Crouching down and hugging his head, he trembled with fear. Seeing Waver's distress, Iskandar had no choice but to spare some energy to chop off Shirou's projected weapons. He laughed and said, "Your attack method is really like Castor." Shirou's heart tightened, confirmed that he did not merge his Saint Graph, then suppressed his voice and said, "Castor is using noble phantasms, but I'm only using basic projection magic." Perhaps. Iskandar laughed. At this moment, Spartacus finally absorbed enough damage, his power increased and his body expanded to a giant size of 10 meters. Oh, 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 oh. Spartacus shouted, and like ropes, his hands grabbed the heads of the two divine bulls. Using the strength of his waist, he pulled with all his might. Iskandar's eyes narrowed and without hesitation, he grabbed Waver's collar and jumped off the chariot. The next moment. Boom! Spartacus, his muscles rippling with power, gracefully executed a backflip, flinging the two majestic bulls and the chariot behind him with ease. Without hesitation, he seized the heads of the divine bulls, and with a resounding crack, he snapped their necks, felling them both in one swift motion. Iskandar pushed Waver aside and surveyed the two divine bulls that Spartacus had killed. A hint of annoyance crossed his face as he scratched his head. "I didn't think it was possible to destroy the Gordius wheel like this. It's quite frustrating. Oh 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 oh!" With a fierce cry, Spartacus rose to his feet, his towering 10-meter frame exuding raw power and strength as he let out a deafening roar. C50. All right. Shirou secretly shouted in his mind. I can win. With his chariot destroyed, Iskandar's last resort is to activate his noble phantasm, Ionio Ihitiroi. However, as a reality marble, it is uncertain what will occur when it clashes with another reality marble, such as Shirou's unlimited blade works. The outcome of the clash between the two reality marbles is uncertain, and there are several possibilities of how the situation might play out. One possibility is that one reality marble will override the other. Another possibility is that they may coexist. The result could also be determined by the difference in magical energy between the two, the degree of mysticism, or the strength of the mental image of the user. Regardless, it is still uncertain as to which outcome will transpire. Even though Shirou is uncertain about how his reality marble, Unlimited Blade works, will fare against Iskandar's noble phantasm, Ionio I Hitiroi. However, with Spartacus by his side, the plan becomes clear. If Iskandar activates Ionio I Hitiroi, Shirou will let Spartacus charge through, and at a crucial moment, he will activate his own reality marble, Unlimited Blade works, and launch a surprise attack on Iskandar. As long as there is a brief pause in Ionio I Hitiroi, the towering Spartacus will have enough time to break through and eliminate Iskandar. A double fatality. The chariot has been destroyed. Waver looked at the debris of the chariot and felt a sense of disappointment. He couldn't help but feel that if he were more useful, if Iskandar had not had to use some of his energy to protect him, the chariot may not have been destroyed. He looked up at Iskandar, ready to express his regret, but was caught off guard when he saw Iskandar laughing. Even though the chariot was destroyed, and they were in a dire situation, Iskandar did not blame Waver, instead his face was filled with a conquering smile. As they stood there, the towering Spartacus charged toward them, roaring loudly. Dong, dong! The ground shook and trees were effortlessly knocked down as if they were mere blades of grass as the giant Spartacus bore down on them with an overwhelming force, charging toward Iskandar. Go, Spartacus! Claim victory! Shirou shouted inwardly, his heart filled with anticipation. It's over, it's over! Waver's heart trembled. The giant charged at them with relentless force, while the thunderstorm raged on with such ferocity that it seemed intent on consuming everything in its path. Iskandar, however, remained unfazed. He turned to Waver and asked calmly, "Have you ever lived in a big world, kid?" Frustrated, Waver exclaimed, "You fool! How can you still expect to teach me anything? Haven't you seen what's happening right now?" Iskandar let out a loud, booming laugh and raised the sword of the king high above his head. "I am Iskandar, the king of conquest," he proclaimed. "Tell me, what is conquest? What does it truly mean to conquer?" Confusion was etched on Waver's face. Iskandar's words seemed like a question directed at someone, yet there was no one else there except themselves and their enemies in the midst of battle. Who was Iskandar asking? Was it the sky, the earth, or perhaps, Waver himself? The young mage couldn't help but wonder as he looked on in bewilderment. Just as he was about to try to persuade Iskandar to focus, a sandstorm began to brew, rising up around them and engulfing everything in its path. "Here it comes!" Shirou's heart tightened as Spartacus instinctively came to a stop beside him. Terrorizing magical energy enveloped the area and in an instant, the world around them changed. The forest, which had been ravaged by Spartacus and Iskandar, disappeared, replaced by a raging sandstorm and an army of soldiers that seemed intent on laying waste to the earth. "What is conquest?" Iskandar asked. "Raise nations to the ground, raise our own to the skies, all for the sake of conquest." The soldiers' voices were uniform, as if they were one entity, and their cries seemed to tear apart the very fabric of the world. Shirou was shocked. A sense of vastness enveloped his small and ordinary heart, as if it covered the sky and earth, and he couldn't help but be moved by the sheer scale of it all. "Is this Ionio I Hitiroi?" Iskandar asked again, his voice ringing out clear above the chaos. "What is conquest?" "Crush armies beneath us, raise our own to new heights, all in the name of conquest." Waver surveyed the endless sea of people, so dense that it felt like a temple fair. Yet, their voices were so uniform and their wills united, as if they could tear apart the earth and sky in pursuit of their goal. It was as if they were all chasing after the end of the starry sea, driven by a singular purpose. "What is conquest?" Iskandar asked again. "The creed of conquest is to vanquish and triumph, to crush the weak and elevate the mighty." Iskandar hoisted himself onto his steed, brandishing his sword. He bellowed, "What is our ultimate goal?" "The end of the starry sea. The end of the starry sea. The end of the starry sea." The entire crowd and soldiers were shouting at the top of their lungs. They were like zealots in pursuit of enlightenment, their eyes burning with passion for their cause. With his sword held aloft, Iskandar directed it toward Spartacus and shouted, "Kill! Kill!" The sound was a unified, thunderous roar, sharp and piercing like a sword slicing through the sky. The army advanced, the overwhelming might of humanity causing the earth and sky to tremble. "They will perish. They will certainly perish. If Spartacus dares to break through like this, he's certain to meet his death. Shirou's eyes were filled with wariness. He had not expected the king's army to be so formidable. He had underestimated them. He clenched his jaw and, without hesitation, merged with the Saint Graph, his body instantly overflowing with surging magical energy. Simultaneously, Wisdom of Mortal kicked in, causing Iskandar's momentum to diminish abruptly and even the soldiers' fervor to slightly wane. In contrast, Spartacus's body grew even more robust, his aura surging outward like tidal waves, with him as the epicenter, causing the gravel within a 5-meter radius to shake. Just as I suspected, it's you, Castor. Iskandar laughed cheerfully. It appeared that he had already deduced Shirou's identity from the beginning. But he didn't seem to mind. The king who held the fate of the world in his hands had greater ambition and greed than anyone else. His heart was as vast as the world he had conquered. Shirou summoned forth a torrent of magical energy, harnessing the raw power of his 27 immature magic circuits. With fierce determination, he projected the massive sword that had once been wielded by Gilgamesh to subdue the legendary gladiator, Spartacus. The sword materialized in a brilliant blaze of light, its razor-sharp edges glinting menacingly as it hovered in the air, ready to unleash destruction at Shirou's command. Of course, he could not fully materialize the giant sword. Instead, he could only project a sword that was a mere fraction of its size, measuring at a mere 15 meters in length. Though it shared the same shape as the original, it was inferior in terms of power and strength. Exhausted, Shirou handed the sword over to Spartacus and shouted, "Spartacus, use this sword to vanquish the oppressors." Oh 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 oh! Spartacus grasped the giant sword with the strength of an ancient giant and charged into the ranks of the enemy army. With swift and powerful strokes, he swept his sword through the throngs of soldiers, leaving a trail of death and destruction in his wake. Those who dared to stand in his way were met with a swift and merciless end, either falling to the ground dead or writhing in agony from their injuries. The battlefield shook with the ferocity of his assault, as he cut a swath of carnage through the enemy ranks. Iskandar shouted loudly, "Change formation 4. Assault the giant blocking our path." In the blink of an eye, the tide of battle shifted. The king's army adapted its strategy to counter Spartacus's rampage. Heavily armored soldiers stepped forward to form a wall of defense, while archer soldiers positioned behind them quickly drew their bows and unleashed a barrage of arrows toward Spartacus. The relentless hail of projectiles rained down upon him. Oh 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 oh! Spartacus was peppered with arrows, yet his face still bore a serene, loving smile. The more he was injured, the more powerful the magical energy that his body emitted. At this moment, his body had swelled to 15 meters, and every time it grew, Wisdom of Mortal would amplify its momentum. The heat emanating from Spartacus's massive frame was intense, like a steaming airflow that made the air around him uncomfortably hot. He held the giant sword projected by Shirou with ease. The sword glinted in the light like a beam of moonlight as he swung it with precision and power, cutting the enemies with deadly efficiency. His movements were deadly as he carved a path of destruction through the ranks of the king's army. Kika. Ah 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 ah. Accompanied by the screams of the soldiers, the heavy armor of the heavily armored soldiers was no match for Spartacus's raw strength. With a single sweep of his sword, he cleaved through their defenses as if they were made of butter, leaving them unable to even put up a momentary resistance. The soldiers, who had thought themselves invincible in their heavy armor, were now nothing more than corpses on the battlefield. The corpses and the sea of blood mixed together, forming a gruesome and macabre scene of death and destruction. The once ordered ranks of the king's army were now nothing more than a disordered mass of bodies, torn apart by the relentless onslaught of Spartacus. The ground was slick with blood, the air thick with the stench of death. It was a human meat grinder. Shirou was aghast. Waver was horrified. Such a vast world, whether it was Shirou as an ordinary individual, or Waver who was entrenched in his small inner world, neither had ever seen or experienced anything like it before. Welcome to the real world of conquest. Iskandar laughed boisterously and then swung his sword and shouted, "Change formation 11." The king's army changed formation once more. The heavy soldiers cleared a direct path to Iskandar. Spartacus shouted loudly, his spirit high as he charged toward Iskandar. "Fool! Fool! Fool! How could you open the formation?" Waver was terrified, staring at the giant who had swelled to 15 meters like a mountain. He was paralyzed with fear. Iskandar's expression remained unchanged, even a hint of joy was present on his face. Kika! As Spartacus rushed towards Iskandar, a strange sound echoed and then the ground suddenly gave way with a series of cracks. The cave-in swallowed Spartacus whole, leaving only his head visible. It turned out that when the heavy armor troops were massacred by Spartacus, there was already a troop that had set up traps around the battlefield. Iskandar, with a sword in hand, stepped on the head of Spartacus, who was now trapped in the quicksand, and plunged his sword into the right eye of the mad warrior. Cha! Blood mixed with tears spurted out, coating his cheek in red. Iskandar laughed triumphantly, "This is my world, my domination, my conquest. Berserker, did you feel it? Ah, 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 ah." Spartacus' magical energy surged, his body expanding to over 20 meters. He reached out from the quicksand trap and struggled to climb out, wielding his huge sword in a frenzy and injuring anyone in his path. The battlefield was a scene of carnage, with dead bodies strewn everywhere. Blood flowed like a river, the ground was trampled and crushed, littered with minced organs and viscera. Severed limbs and broken bodies were visible as far as the eye could see. This was a barbaric world, a world of conquest, a primal, wild world of men that had existed since ancient times. In this world, civilization, morality, good and evil, all of those things that people hold dear, disappeared. Words were meaningless, strategies were pointless, and only the most primitive wildness existed in the blood of men. In this world, there is only one rule. Conquer or be conquered. Ha ha ha. Iskandar, surrounded by his heavy troops, laughed triumphantly. To him, fighting, bloodshed, and cruelty were the most genuine things in the world of men vying for dominance. Spartacus had grown even stronger, towering over his enemies like an ancient giant. With ease, he killed a group of soldiers and trampled another to death. Even the heat he exhaled was enough to blow over a circle of soldiers. But it was clear that he was reaching his limit. Yes, reaching his limit. The body that was brewing with magical energy had begun to riot and was gradually approaching the point of self-destruction. Shirou did not know if Spartacus' self-destruction could destroy the king's army, as in the Nasuverse, Spartacus had never fought Iskandar to the death. Despite his valiant efforts, Spartacus was unable to defeat the king's army, which controlled over 5 million square kilometers. He knew that a hero who rises up in rebellion would have even less chance of defeating the empire's tyranny. But it's not just about having swords and shields, but also about having keen eyes and quick wits. Shirou understood that swords and shields protect the eyes and the brain, and the eyes and brain also protect the swords and shields. He inhaled deeply before slowly raising his arm. "I am the bone of my sword." His voice was steady and resolute. The chant of unlimited blade works flowed effortlessly from his lips as he fell into a trance-like state. In his mind's eye, he saw a solitary figure clad in scarlet, standing tall and proud amid a sea of gears that seemed to stretch on endlessly, like the inner workings of a vast, industrial machine. Without a doubt, this is a record of the heroic spirit Emiya within the Saint Graph that has been aroused. What is this? Iskandar furrowed his eyebrows, looking at Shirou with interest. "Are you going to use your noble phantasm, caster?" C51. "Steel is my body and fire is my blood. I have created over 1,000 blades. Unknown to death, nor known to life. Have withstood pain to create many weapons. Yet, those hands will never hold anything. So as I pray, unlimited blade works." As Shirou completed the final invocation of unlimited blade works, his 27 magic circuits cried out in pain as they were drained of all their magical energy. Crack, crack, crack. The epic struggle for dominance in the world of the heavens and earth was suddenly disrupted as an otherworldly force descended upon the scene, manifesting itself in the form of a colossal gear that materialized behind Shirou, looming ominously behind him, hinting at the immense power it held. Waver, who was struggling to maintain the magical energy for Iskandar's activity, was left speechless as he stared at the scene before him. "It's also a reality marble!" he exclaimed in shock. A reality marble or innate bounded field is the materialization and projection of one's inner world onto reality. When activated, a reality marble drastically alters the surrounding space, transforming it into a completely different landscape. Reality marbles are created worlds that are completely cut off from normal reality. They project the internal landscape of the user and seal off the regular world. According to the world egg theory, the actualization of a reality marble is achieved by switching the position of the self and the world while keeping the boundary the same. This causes the size of the self to expand, enclosing the world in a small container. Throughout history, there have been very few magi with reality marble, but now not only does his writer possess a reality marble, but that caster also has one. The appearance of two reality marbles at once is an incredibly rare occurrence, akin to a mythological story. And now, Waver found himself witnessing these two powerful reality marble about to face off in front of him. You want to use your noble phantasm to fight against mine? Very well. I approve. Iskandar bellowed with laughter. Crack, crack, crack. The massive gear hung suspended in the sky behind Shirou, its gears turning relentlessly, and in the blink of an eye, the world behind him was transformed. A crimson desert stretched out as far as the eye could see, littered with countless swords, while the horizon flickered with the dancing flames of an inferno. The dark, ominous sky was dominated by giant gears spinning in a never-ending cycle, resembling a world of smelting factories. In an instant, the reality was split in two. But Shirou's forehead was slick with cold sweat as he activated the reality marble, Unlimited Blade Works. He could feel the Ionio Ihitiroi constantly eroding his mental landscape. Once the erosion was complete, Shirou feared that his Unlimited Blade Works would be completely consumed by Ionio Ihitiroi. Spartacus, protect me and I will protect you in return. Together, we are invincible. Shirou bellowed, his mind focused and at his command, the swords that lay scattered across the crimson desert behind him rose up, soaring through the air like arrows from the heavens, hurtling toward the soldiers surrounding Spartacus. The soldiers, caught off guard by the sudden attack, could do little to defend themselves as the swords rained down upon them, slicing through armor and flesh with ease. Some tried to raise their shields in an attempt to block the onslaught, but it was to no avail as the swords cut through them as if they were made of paper. Iskandar let out a deep laugh. Are you trying to challenge this king? Are you trying to fight with me, caster? Ha 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 ha, I approve. His expression then became serious as he commanded, Formation 1, Conquer. 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 Shirou's face was covered in sweat as he watched the soldiers divide into 3 light infantry and charge toward him. The soldiers of the Ionio Ihitiroi were formidable, following Iskandar's conquest throughout his life, and Shirou knew he was outnumbered. Despite this, he had the Unlimited Blade Works at his disposal, which held thousands of swords copied from the heroic spirit Emiya. Even so, among these soldiers, there was no shortage of talented individuals with servants-level reactions. Shirou shouted, Berserker! The oppressors are here! Oh 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 oh! Spartacus, towering at an impressive 20 meters tall, leaped into the space of Unlimited Blade Works with a single bound. His formidable muscle strength propelled him forward as he swept his giant sword, decimating the light infantry that charged toward Shirou. Using his body as a shield, blocking the army that attempted to conquer Shirou's world. Shirou raised his hand and dozens of swords flew into the sky, penetrating the dense area of the Ionio Ihitiroi. Then, dash broken phantasm. Boom 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 boom. In a split second, there was a deafening series of explosions as countless soldiers were vaporized by the blast. But instead of cowing them, the display of power only seemed to invigorate the enemy troops as they charged forward, eager to conquer the world. They rushed towards Shirou with unbridled ferocity, their eyes alight with the thrill of battle. Conquer! Advance! Conquer! Excitement and fanaticism burned within the army like religious fervor. They advanced like a swarm of ants, a formidable force that shook the earth and sky. Spartacus swung his giant sword, clearing a path through the approaching light troops. Shirou, too, drew sword after sword, slicing through the dense ranks of soldiers. He unleashed broken phantasm, cutting down one soldier after another. This was a war of individuals and groups, a war of giants and armies, a war of worlds. A battle between an unmatched elephant and a fanatical ant swarm. Explosions rumbled on, filling the air with smoke. The ground was littered with broken corpses and weapons, blood soaking into the earth. Death loomed on the edge where the two worlds collided. Morals and laws had long been forgotten, replaced by the wildness and brutality of humanity that now consumed the entire space. The War of Reality Marbles. This magnificent and wild scene was deeply etched in Waver's eyes. It pierced through his small and insignificant world like a sword and arrow. Waver's world was once defined by Magecraft, papers, and the desire for respect and self-validation. However, his small perspective is now being shattered as he is exposed to the harsh realities and the magnificent clash in front of him. It's as if he's been a frog living at the bottom of a well, only to be suddenly lifted out and given a glimpse of the vast expanse of the true world. He wants to witness. He yearns to continue to bear witness to the unfolding of this modern myth, to see it through to the end. But... ah! Waver groaned as he clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain. His magic circuits were overloading, sapping his energy, and a fiery heat was consuming him as if it would burn him to ashes. No. It can't be. I want to see it to the end. That's enough, caster. Iskandar bellowed as he pulled back the Ionio Ihatiroi. Waver gazed up at Iskandar, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. With bitterness in his voice, he spat out, I can still fight, I can still go on. How can you give up? Before he could finish his sentence, Iskandar whirled around, placing a massive hand on Waver's head and grinning widely, revealing a row of shining white teeth. There's no need to push yourself so hard. You're still young, and the journey ahead is long. Take your time, and don't rush it. Shirou deactivated Unlimited Blade Works, his face glistening with sweat and his eyes weary. He looked at Iskandar and asked, how could you withdraw first, Iskandar? As you know, I am caster. Weren't you afraid that I could have killed you just now? Iskandar laughed loudly, if I were afraid, I wouldn't be Iskandar. His words may sound confident, but in reality, he had already come to the realization that continuing to fight in this manner would only result in mutual destruction. Shirou sighed in his heart. This king of Conqueror may appear rough and ignorant, but in fact, his thoughts were quite subtle and he was well aware of the benefits. It's no surprise that he was able to achieve the great accomplishment of conquering over 5 million square kilometers. I concede this defeat gracefully. I have lost this time, Iskandar said with a carefree laugh before mounting his beloved horse. He scooped Waver up by the collar and slung him over his shoulder before riding off. Fool! Fool! I still have command seals. I still have command seals. How can you lose? Waver's distant voice could be heard yelling. Shirou breathed a sigh of relief. If the fight had continued, he would have been forced to use command seals to supplement his magical energy and fight a war of attrition. However, we can win. Shirou clenched his fist, with the power of Unlimited Blade Works and Spartacus, victory is within our reach. Spartacus. He looked at Spartacus, which had expanded to almost 30 meters. Oh, weakling. Shirou reached out and touched the giant sword that he had projected, looked up at the giant face of Spartacus, now missing one eye, and said, you are my sword and shield, I am your eyes and mind. This sword is the symbol of our partnership, together we will defeat the cruel and oppressive ones and win this Holy Grail War. Cruel ones, oppressors, weak ones. Spartacus possessed immense magical energy, but it was volatile and uncontrolled. As a result, his rationality suffered, and he became increasingly unable to articulate his thoughts. Despite this, he retained the power to lead the oppressed towards freedom. Shirou glanced at the colossal, bloated Spartacus, towering at almost 30 meters in height. He understood that if Spartacus were to enter the city, the secret of the Holy Grail War would be exposed, and he couldn't allow that to happen. For now, he can only hide Spartacus here and use the forest to conceal him. He looks at the giant sword that he had projected, and couldn't help but feel proud of himself. The giant sword he had projected was perfectly suited for Spartacus. Victory! I can achieve victory. Because I am no longer alone. C5-2. Shink. The main hall of the church fell silent as the piercing sound of a blade ringing through the night air echoed through the room. Lying on his back, the supervisor of the Fourth Holy Grail War, Kotomine Raisei, had a blade made of mercury protruding from his abdomen. Blood immediately began to pour from the wound, staining the ground beneath him. You! Raisei, now weak, lifted his head and looked up to see Kainith's face, expressionless as if nothing had occurred. Reciprocity is the name of the game, Kainith stated. And let me tell you, as a supervisor, secretly aligning yourself with the Tosaka family, this is a punishment straight from the heavens. Raisei's eyes finally came to rest on Kainith as the latter stowed away his volumen hydrargyrum before Raisei collapsed and slipped into unconsciousness, not to wake again. Kainith, we can't find the Saint Graph. Kainith's fiancée, Sola, searched the entire church, but still could not find the objective of their visit, the Saint Graph. Has that old man hidden it or given it to that scoundrel? Kainith's eyebrows knitted together in frustration before smoothing out as he continued, forget it, Sola. It's just a minor game. Our opponents are nothing but a group of backwater magi. Even without the Saint Graph, I can easily emerge victorious. But this way, it will be difficult to find the vessel, Sola said. No worries, it's simply a question of effort and strategy. Kenneth L. Meloy Archibald can accomplish anything with just a bit of thought, Kenneth said with a nonchalant expression. Kenneth's life had always been one of ease, envied by others and admired by many. Being a genius was a title that came naturally to him, and there was nothing he couldn't accomplish with a bit of thought and strategy. Lancer, where do you believe that valuable research vessel is being kept? Sola's eyes shifted to Diarmuid, inquiring. Kenneth's face turned ashen. Diarmuid sighed inwardly and remained silent. Suddenly, Diarmuid's eyes widened, and he turned his head, gazing out of the window towards the southeast. Master, I sense Castor's presence nearby. It seems we've been beaten to the punch. Is it the Tosaka family? Humph. Even those small-time nobles from the countryside dare to try and take that precious vessel from me? Don't even think about it. That vessel is mine, and mine alone, Kenneth exclaimed with disdain. He looked at Sola, and added, it belongs to me and Lady Sola. As Kenneth prepared to depart the church, Sola looked at the blood-soaked Raisei, and asked, aren't you going to finish him off? If he's still alive, he'll report this to the Holy Church, and it could lead to unpleasant consequences for you. I may not be a battle magus, but I am not much weaker than them. Kenneth does not require a second strike when it comes to killing. With that, Kenneth and Diarmuid made their way toward the suburban forest at a sprint. Upon reaching their destination, Diarmuid charged ahead while Kenneth unleashed his Volumen Hydrargyrum, a unique supreme mystic code created from mercury filled with Magecraft. He prepared to infiltrate slowly, with a cool, collected smile on his face. But then, boom 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 boom. The ground trembled, and in the next instant, a massive arm emerged from the ground, resembling a giant hand that covered the sky and blocked out the sun, striking Diarmuid with its force. Boom! With the ease of a human swatting a mosquito, Diarmuid was struck by the giant arm and sent flying. His body fell like a meteor, causing a splash in the nearby sea before crashing into the ruins on the other side. His condition was unknown. This. Kenneth stared in shock at the scene, his jaw agape. Kenneth. Let's retreat for now. You're right, Sola. Let's retreat strategically. We'll come back another day, Kenneth said as he and Sola turned and fled the scene. The giant hand that emerged from a mythological legend, the true identity of this monster remained a mystery. It was wise to retreat strategically. Shirou looked up in the direction where Diarmuid had been struck and muttered to himself, just now, there was a sudden presence of a servant, but now it's gone. What happened? With a sense of uncertainty, Shirou turned his gaze to the towering presence of Spartacus and couldn't help but feel a sense of security. He had to admit, the feeling of being protected and safe made Shirou feel incredibly good. Despite Scathika's refusal to materialize, and the unexpected nature of this war, he had still found someone he could rely on for safety. However, the current form of Spartacus should not be underestimated, otherwise, it would lead to disastrous consequences. But this doesn't mean that he can't do anything. Swords and shields are responsible for fighting and protecting, while as the eyes and brains, it is necessary to discern direction and devise a strategy for victory. Shirou is by no means a skilled strategist, he is just an ordinary person who has been thrust into the stage of heroes. He doesn't possess great wisdom, but he is consistently resourceful. He relies on having read the script and understanding his opponent's characters, especially when the opponent is already trapped. Thus, Shirou already knows what he should do next. Kiritsugu, if it were you, you would have definitely noticed, right? Shirou's low voice echoed in the darkness. Dawn has come. Kaire, who emerged from the basement, finally discovered the unconscious Raisei lying in a pool of blood. Father. As Kaire rushed over to his father's side, he gazed upon Raisei's ashen complexion, unsure of what words to offer in this moment of grief. The thought of someone brutally taking the life of the man who had placed so much trust in him should have ignited a fiery rage within him, yet Kaire felt nothing but a numbing emptiness. He knew he should be filled with anger and hatred, yet as he tried to summon those emotions, Kaire found his heart to be as still as a tranquil sea with no ripples. A disturbing and irrational thought crossed his mind, if death is inevitable, why not let me be the one to end your suffering? Kaire was both horrified and fascinated by this thought, and the conflicting emotions brought him pain and confusion. He couldn't understand why he would even entertain such a notion, yet he couldn't shake it off. He felt lost in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, unsure of how to reconcile them. He was born on December 28, 1967, while his father Raisei was away on a pilgrimage. As he grew, he was trained as an executor under Raisei's guidance during his teenage years. Raisei had high expectations for his only child and son, and Kairi did not disappoint. He developed into a person of excellent character and ability. However, despite his achievements, Kairi was plagued by confusion in his heart. He couldn't quite grasp what his father meant by the beauty he always spoke of. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was missing something important. As Kairi grew older, his confusion only deepened. He enrolled in the Theological College of Manresa, where he transitioned from trainee to executor who could operate independently, and received his second baptism ceremony. Despite graduating from college 2 years ahead of schedule as the top student, he still couldn't understand his purpose in life. He couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something missing, something he needed to understand. Kairi struggled to find his true path, as he couldn't see good things or happiness in the way most people did. In an effort to change his abnormality, he tried many things, including becoming an executor. His final attempt to find fulfillment was to start a family. He married a woman named Claudia Hortensia, who was suffering from a terminal illness and had only a few years left to live. During their 2-year marriage, Kairi worked hard to love his wife, and she in turn worked hard to make him love her. She was willing to do whatever it takes to help fix his abnormality. But, in the end, Kairi still couldn't gain the happiness of a normal person through his wife. For him, happiness was derived from his wife's suffering. The more she wanted to help him, the more he wanted to see her suffer. This realization made Kairi even more desperate and lost. Claudia, to prove that Kairi could love and was a person with a right to be loved, committed suicide in front of him. But all Kairi could think was, if she was going to die anyway, I wish I could have killed her with my own hands. Kairi is consumed by sadness and often thinks back to that time. He can't decide whether his sorrow is because he couldn't enjoy his wife's death or because he loved her and wanted to end her suffering himself. Every time he thinks of this, his thoughts are interrupted by confusion and uncertainty. Perhaps the answer will elude him forever. However, it was also due to his wife's death that Kairi began to study spiritual healing Magecraft. Now, as he stands in front of his father's corpse, he is plagued by another question. He is filled with doubts, wondering if his sorrow at this moment is because he couldn't enjoy his father's death or because he couldn't kill his father himself. Suddenly, Gilgamesh appeared by Kairi's side and asked, "Are you awake?" Kairi, who was lost in his thoughts, was startled by Gilgamesh's sudden appearance and unsure of what he meant by the question. "I don't understand," Kairi said, looking at Gilgamesh in confusion. "This mongrel, you still don't understand?" Gilgamesh sneered as he retrieved a potion from his treasury. He poured it over Raisei's injuries. "Your father's not dead yet. The mongrel who ambushed him is a foolish, arrogant imbecile who can't even use a blade properly. Use this as a remedy, and he'll survive." Gilgamesh then hurled a knife at Kairi's feet. Kairi looked at the knife, then let out a maniacal laugh. He clutched his head and slammed it against the ground. Thud! The holy scripture he held in his arm slipped from his grip and fell to the ground. Kairi paid it no heed and persisted in bashing his head against the ground. Thud, thud, thud. Blood and tears mingled as he laughed maniacally, the warmth of it running down the pages of the holy scripture. He snatched up the knife and snapped it in half with his bare hands, the sound of the breaking metal piercing the air. "Oh!" Gilgamesh said with interest, "You're finally awake." Kairi's behavior and actions in the presence of his father's corpse reveal a disturbed and unstable state of mind. The laughter and violence he exhibits suggest a difficulty in processing his emotions, and the reasons behind his actions remain uncertain. Yes, I never really considered it. I always put my faith in God's beautiful teachings, but the reality is so chaotic." Kairi laughed, tears streaming down his face, his twisted smile becoming more pronounced. "I just don't understand, why did you help me? You're clearly my teacher's servant. Is that even a question?" sneered Gilgamesh. "The so-called savior's doctrine is steeped in false righteousness, trapping evil under the guise of hypocrisy." He continued, "And as for Tokiomi, he's nothing but a traitor who attempted to overthrow his king. He is not worthy of being called a subject. Do you understand the truth about the Holy Grail?" Kairi asked. "Don't underestimate me. You're mongrel. When I was playing with those so-called gods, your ancestors hadn't even been born yet." Gilgamesh said contemptuously. "That's true." Kairi lowered his head slightly. After 3 years of studying under Tokiomi, Kyrie was also aware of the truth about the Holy Grail. The so-called Holy Grail War, in essence, is a grand scheme orchestrated by the Ainsburn, Tosaka, and Matu families, with the ultimate goal of reaching the root. The system is divided into the Greater Grail and the Lesser Grail. The Lesser Grail, the prize awarded to the winner of the Holy Grail War, is the object that the 7 groups of magi and heroic spirits fought for. It is believed to have the power to instantly grant any wish, however, in reality, it only serves to preserve the souls of deceased servants. The Holy Grail's true essence is a highly crystallized form of magical energy that has been stored in spiritual veins for 60 years. While it may be able to accomplish some simple wishes, its true power is limited and it is nothing more than a lie. Why do you, as a king, protect that caster? Kyrie asked. Is it simply because he is still a child, or is there something more to it? Is he, like me? I may have a fondness for the pure soul of a child, but that is not the case with him. Gilgamesh shook his head. His soul is even dirtier and more chaotic than yours. But, he is different from you. Kyrie lowered his head slightly. I am still confused. I must go find Kiritsugu, that extremely purpose-driven man may be able to give me the answer. As Gilgamesh's figure gradually faded away, he spoke with a flourish, mongrel affairs, unless they are ugly, have no bearing on this king. But mark my words, when I appear before you again, that is the true grand theatre worth savouring with wine. Ha 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 ha. Kyrie hugged Risei and headed to the hospital for treatment. The question that had once consumed him, he now had the answer to. He could not find pleasure in his father's death and was unable to kill him himself. These 2 options were not ways to fill the void inside of him. Because no matter which one he chose, it would only serve to redeem his pitiful father, who until his death, had believed in his son's righteousness without a shred of doubt. Kyrie had come to understand his true self. The act of redeeming others could not quell the growing turmoil within him. Rather than allowing his pitiful father to hold on to the belief in his son's righteousness until his death, it would be more satisfying for Kyrie to let his father witness the depth of his son's inner depravity and mercilessly shatter that trust. That, he thought, would bring true pleasure. Ha ha ha. Holding his face, as he imagined his father's collapse, his heart felt a mix of pleasure and pain, hot tears streaming down his face, twisted in a smile. His father Risei, from the day Kyrie was born, had dedicated himself to pursuing God's grace and beauty, dividing his soul in 2. The good was on display and the evil was locked away. Kyrie was never taught how to guide or release it, he was simply taught how to use the prison to trap the evil half of his soul. This trap had held him captive for 27 years, only now did he truly understand the nature of his existence. Human nature is evil. For 27 years, he never guided or clarified his inner evil, whether it was his father Risei or his teachers, they only degraded it and trapped it in his heart, without any outlet to vent. It continued to accumulate and brew, without any release, eventually forming the evil that consumed all that was good inside him. And this is why the Grail had chosen him. Could it truly be said that he was worthy of the Grail? He himself had been trapped in the righteous prison and forgotten the true sense of his existence, yet the Grail had discovered it in an instant and bestowed upon him a curse. As Kyrie walked out of the hospital, he summoned Assassin and asked him, "Is there any news of Kiritsugu's whereabouts?" "Yes," Assassin replied, "he was spotted by us when he was attacking Castor's master. He is currently on his way to the hospital where Castor's master is located." "I understand." Kyrie nodded and dismissed Assassin. Kiritsugu holds a special significance to Kyrie. This became apparent to him when he saw the information Tokiomi had obtained on Kiritsugu. He uses dirty and vile methods, and his actions and belief are vastly different from those of Magi. All actions appear aimless but yet they have a grand goal. He is similar to Kyrie but yet vastly different. Kyrie had once yearned to meet Kiritsugu, a man who was both similar and dissimilar to him, in order to gain a deeper understanding of himself. But now, he has finally found the answers he was searching for, yet the realization is both comforting and difficult to accept. He desires to speak with Kiritsugu and seek validation for his newfound understanding, however, a face-to-face encounter is no longer his goal. Kyrie made his way back to the basement of the church and utilized the Tosaka magical device to contact Tokiomi. "Teacher," he said, "I have completed a thorough investigation and have uncovered something suspicious regarding Castor." "What is it?" Tokiomi queried. "He is not a servant, but rather a being similar to a dependent spirit who has fused with his master and is participating in this war. The body that has been fused is that of Castor's master," Kyrie revealed. "A fusion between human and servant?" How is this possible? Such a thing is unprecedented. If the clock tower were to discover this kind of vessel, it would undoubtedly be sealed away. Yes, that is why Lancer's master, the lord from the clock tower, is currently searching for the corpse of Castor's master, Kyrie confirmed. Where is his corpse? At the police hospital. Good. As the sound of someone leaving echoed through the phonograph, the room fell silent. Kyrie sat in the basement, engrossed in the Book of God. A smile suddenly appeared on his lips. Kyrie wondered if the information was a blessing or a curse. Tokiomi didn't bother to ask where Kyrie had obtained it, a fact that was crucial. He couldn't help but wonder how it would all play out in the end. Kyrie's heart was in turmoil as he read the Book of God with a mix of anticipation, pleasure, and waves of excitement. Generosity, tenacity, honesty, loyalty, diligence, justice, patience. In the dim and quiet basement, a voice resounded, reciting melodious words. C53. The forest that borders the main road in Fuyaki City is a place shrouded in mystery and legend. The dense, untamed wilderness is rumored to be the site of a fantastical castle, with stories circulating of children who venture into the woods in search of it, only to find themselves with no memory of their experience upon returning. The existence of the castle remains a mystery, but it is a topic of frequent discussion among the citizens of Fuyaki City. Some believe that it is a real place, hidden away in the forest, while others think it is nothing more than an urban legend. Perhaps one day, as the land is developed, the truth of the castle's existence will be revealed. In fact, deep within the heart of the forest lies an ancient castle, built by the Einsborn family as a strategic fortress for the Holy Grail War. It was completed long before the Meiji Restoration, shrouded in secrecy and hidden from the eyes of the outside world. The ancient castle is fortified with many powerful bounded fields, designed to protect it from intruders. The one that confuses local residents is just a small aspect of the castle's defenses. At this moment, the castle serves as the base for Artoria and Irisville, two powerful individuals who play an important role in the ongoing Holy Grail War. With its strategic location, advanced defenses, and hidden nature, the ancient castle is the perfect stronghold for them to plan their next moves and protect themselves from their enemies. The sound of galloping horses echoed through the forest, growing louder as they approached the ancient castle. Artoria, her hand gripping the hilt of her holy sword, stepped out of the castle gates and gazed towards the forest. The visitor had made no effort to conceal their approach and was now emerging from the trees, riding towards her with purpose. It was none other than Iskandar, astride his beloved horse. Conqueror King, what is the purpose of this uninvited visit? Is this an attack on us? Artoria asked, her tone laced with suspicion. Haha, that's not it. I've come to invite you to join me for a drink. Iskandar laughed in response, his demeanor light and friendly. Artoria's gaze shifted to Iskandar's horse, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion as she asked, "Where is your chariot? I don't see it with you." Iskandar scratched his head, a hint of distress in his voice. "My chariot got destroyed by a hero. I thought I'd come and see if you could just give me the Holy Grail directly." "Do you really think that's possible?" Artoria looked at Iskandar incredulously. The idea seemed even more naive than her own. "Why not? War isn't just about physical weapons," Iskandar said, with a chuckle. "If you could just give me the Holy Grail, we could avoid all the fighting and the heroes wouldn't have to get hurt. We could conquer the world together." "We?" Artoria's brows furrowed tighter. Iskandar nodded. "On the way here, I saw that shiny king and brought him along." "Insolent mongrel. A king should not be insulted in such a manner." Gilgamesh appeared, his eyebrows raised in anger as he glared at Iskandar. "If you ever refer to me as a shiny king again, I will see to it that you are punished." "Why are all of you so narrow-minded?" Iskandar laughed. "But it doesn't matter what you call me, as long as you have great ambitions and an open mind, anyone can be a hero." He then looked at Artoria and asked, "Night King, my companion, and I have come a long way. Won't you invite us in for a seat?" Artoria looked at the two of them, then turned and said, "Come in." After Ryu Unosuk committed suicide, Kiritsugu spent countless hours mulling over potential solutions to the crisis caused by the mystery leak. Finally, after much contemplation, an idea came to him. In an effort to remedy the crisis, Kiritsugu used suggestion to infiltrate a prison and murder 6 inmates, branding them with various red markings resembling command seals. He then used suggestion on the police chief to reveal their deaths. However, Kiritsugu's own picture has been exposed and the ramifications of the incident could not be quickly erased, even with the police chief's efforts to minimize the impact. To eliminate the possibility of the mystery being exposed, Kiritsugu tasked Mui, his assistant in hunting magi, with performing plastic surgery on one of the prisoners. Although Mui was an ordinary person, her work with Kiritsugu had led her to acquire various skills, including makeup and plastic surgery, which were useful in infiltrations and changing one's appearance. However, transforming a criminal into Kiritsugu's appearance would take time. So, Kiritsugu instructed Mui to acquire a criminal's corpse first. "Where are you headed off to now?" Mui queried. "I'm going to inspect Castor's master's corpse," Kiritsugu replied. "Do you suspect something is amiss?" Mui asked. "It's strange that things seem to be leading me to kill that young man from the very beginning," Kiritsugu said, deep in thought. Kiritsugu lit a cigarette, gave Mui a brief wave, and departed, leaving behind a solitary and forlorn silhouette for her to gaze upon. As the early morning light began to filter through the trees, Shirou quietly waited for Spartacus to settle before making his move. Once he was sure Spartacus was in position, Shirou carefully set up his ambush near the police hospital, ready to strike at just the right moment. Following Ryu Unosuke's suicide attempt the day before, he miraculously survived. However, the bullet was lodged in the center of his brain, making it impossible to remove. He was currently receiving treatment at the hospital where Shirou had set up his ambush. Kiritsugu had been able to track down Ryu Unosuke's whereabouts by following a trail of clues he had left behind. The reason Shirou was so certain was that he had gone to the police headquarters to check the surveillance footage. He discovered that the footage was missing for certain periods of time, specifically from 1:25 p.m. to 1:47 p.m., and 5:14 p.m. to 5:34 p.m. Out of all the masters, only Shirou and Kiritsugu would have the skills and cunning to play the game in such a way. Additionally, it was Kiritsugu himself who had led the police pursuit of Ryu Unosuke the previous day. Shirou's plan was not particularly complex, he had simply counted on the revelation of mystery to draw out his enemies and force them to come after him. In the end, it was Kiritsugu who had taken the bait. Kiritsugu had not made his move the previous night as Shirou knew that the masters were most active and engaged in battles during the night. The most crucial point was that the thing he had set on Ryu Unosuke's body had not been triggered, indicating that no magus had yet come into contact with him. Now, during the day, Shirou would stay put and wait to see if he could catch Kiritsugu in his ambush. Even if he failed to ambush him, losing one day would not be significant enough to cause concern. Perched in the forests, Shirou without using his Saint Graph kept watching over the police hospital with the help of binoculars. However, there was something that made him feel a bit strange. It's too quiet. The entire police hospital appeared to be abandoned, the eerie silence adding to the sense of unease. It was a bit frightening. Shirou's eyebrows furrowed as he tried to understand why the hospital appeared to be deserted. He had expected it to be bustling with activity, but instead, it was eerily quiet. It was deathly quiet as if there wasn't a single soul inside. The silence was unsettling, like the calm before a raging storm. It made Shirou uneasy. And just as that thought crossed his mind, someone appeared. "Is it Kiritsugu?" Shirou quickly turned his head to see who had appeared and his eyebrows raised in surprise. He had been expecting to ambush Kiritsugu, but instead, he had stumbled upon another master. Gilgamesh's master, Tosaka Tokiomi. But how did he end up here? C54. Upon discovering from the police chief that Ryu Unosuke was still alive, Kiritsugu immediately used suggestion to inquire about Ryu Unosuke's current location. Later, Kiritsugu drove to the police hospital but halted before arriving. Upon observation, he noticed diesel generators supplying power to the police hospital. The hospital was constructed like a prison, with only one entrance consisting of 3 layers of iron bars to prevent any inmates from escaping after being cured. He realized that if someone were to enter through the main entrance and block it, then ignite the diesel generators, it would cause a massive explosion, destroying the entire hospital and everyone inside. To Kiritsugu, it was a perfect burial ground. Kiritsugu had begun to have doubts about his plan. As a killer, he had always avoided dangerous situations like this. However, he knew he had to uncover the truth about Castor's master, otherwise, he would not be able to rest easy. In fact, the best time to investigate was yesterday when Castor's master had committed suicide. However, at that time, Castor had disappeared in front of him, resulting in a clear defeat for them. As a result, Kiritsugu was preoccupied with thoughts on how to clean up the mess caused by Castor's master. People tend to act this way when they are worried about something, reason disappears and they tend not to pay attention to the finer details. However, Kiritsugu is not an ordinary person, he had his doubts from the beginning. It's just that Castor's withdrawal seemed to have no problems, so he quickly moved on to dealing with the trouble caused by Castor's master. The more he felt something was amiss, the more he rushed to investigate. He knew that if dirty and contemptible individuals like Castor's master were allowed to continue existing, they could cause even more trouble. However, before confirming that it was safe, he wouldn't easily get caught up in such an obvious trap. Kiritsugu surveyed his surroundings and his gaze finally settled on a small grove of trees nearby. The grove was the highest point in the area, and from there he could clearly see the inside of the police station hospital with the use of binoculars. However, he knew that the places with the best visibility were also the best hiding spots for those keeping watches. Therefore, Kiritsugu avoided the grove and instead hid in a van. He then opened his toolbox and deployed 2 small surveillance drones. One flew towards the police hospital, while the other flew towards the small grove of trees. These drones were very small and could easily go unnoticed if not observed carefully. If the police station hospital was indeed a trap for him, then there must be someone lying in wait outside the hospital. The small grove of trees not only provided a good hiding spot but also a way to monitor the inside of the police station hospital, making it a perfect location for an ambush. As Kiritsugu zoomed in on a tree branch displayed on the screen, he spotted a figure dressed in an unusual outfit, perched on a branch and peering through binoculars towards the hospital where the police station was located. The figure's attire was entirely a verdant green, with a helmet covering its face and a pair of scarlet compound eyes that gave the impression of an insect. Could this be some sort of specialized gear? However, sure enough, someone is keeping watch on the police hospital. Kiritsugu felt unperturbed. In fact, it was such a predictable outcome that he would have been surprised if he hadn't made the discovery. The only question that remained was, who was this individual? As of now, the only person whose identity remained a mystery was the master of the Matu family. Based on intelligence gathered by the Einsborn family, the current head of the Matu family and master of the Holy Grail War was Byakuya. According to records, he was an unremarkable magus, yet he had summoned the powerful servant, Berserker. If the figure Kiritsugu had spotted was indeed Matu Byakuya, he couldn't help but wonder why he would be present. Kiritsugu's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Could he be planning to use Castor's master's body and lying in wait for me to investigate, he wondered. No. I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I must confirm if this person is truly Byakuya. It's possible that he is Castor's master in disguise. Although shocking, Kiritsugu couldn't completely rule out this theory. Even though Castor's master had committed suicide in front of him the day before, but his methods were still fresh in Kiritsugu's mind. He knew that if he didn't consider every possibility, his years as a magus killer would have been for nothing and he would have died a long time ago. Having been deceived by Castor's master's tactics before, he was determined not to let it happen again. As for Castor's aura disappearing in front of him, Kiritsugu couldn't help but wonder if Castor possessed a treasure or skill akin to assassin's concealment, allowing him to fake his death and lurk in the shadows. The possibility couldn't be ignored. If that were the case, then the young man who had committed suicide yesterday was merely a decoy. But if he was a decoy, how could he have possessed such strong magical energy? His eyes flickered as he considered all the possibilities. He methodically listed them in his mind, refusing to jump to any conclusions without solid evidence. He knew the importance of patience and not making hasty decisions. He knew that the truth will reveal itself in due time, and he was determined to find it. And ultimately, the decisive evidence was Castor's master, or more accurately, the young man who had committed suicide yesterday. Kiritsugu's gaze was fixed on the surveillance monitor in the police hospital. Crackle. The screen flickered and crackled as he watched. The surveillance monitor of the police hospital was now filled with static. The last image that came through was of raging flames. What happened? In the police hospital, Tokiomi gazed upon the destroyed surveillance monitor, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. It seems the Einsborn family also desires the vessel capable of merging with the servant. Tokiomi's smile remained calm and collected, betraying no hint of surprise at the sight of the surveillance monitor. He had been well aware of Kiritsugu's activities beforehand. The previous night, upon hearing from Kaire the truth about the vessel, Tokiomi had wasted no time in coming to the police hospital to make necessary arrangements. The body capable of merging with the servant was an invaluable treasure for any magus. As the master of the clock tower, Kenneth desired it, as did Tokiomi. The two of them were willing to do whatever it takes to claim it as their own and use it for their own benefit. So his primary adversary in this affair was Kenneth, but thanks to Kairei's assistance, he had received the crucial information in time. Upon his hurried arrival at the police hospital that night, he found the place still abuzz with activity, and Kenneth was nowhere to be seen. This proved to be a fortunate turn of events for Tokyomi. Tosaka Tokyomi's opponent, the ruler of the clock tower, was a formidable force, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of pressure in his heart. However, he had an ace up his sleeve in the form of Gilgamesh, who he knew was far superior to his opponent's servant, Dire Muid. He believed that if he could take the initiative and attack with Gilgamesh, he had a good chance of defeating Kenneth. However, the problem was that Gilgamesh refused to follow his orders. Tosaka was faced with a magus from a highly esteemed 9th-generation family of magi and one of the 12 lords renowned as the prodigy of the clock tower. Given this formidable opposition, Tosaka lacked confidence in his own abilities. As a result, he had resolved not to leave the safety of the Tosaka residence since the war's inception. His plan was to bide his time, allowing the other factions to weaken one another before using a command seal to control Gilgamesh and eliminate the final group, ultimately securing victory in the war. To prevent any exposure of the mystery, Tosaka used suggestion to drive away the mortals in the area and set up a bounded field around the hospital. Once the bounded field was set up, he planned to go to the morgue to examine the vessel that could fuse with the servant. However, at that moment, the bounded field was activated, causing a surveillance drone that was monitoring the area to crash. Tokyomi, having thoroughly researched his opponent's information, knew that the only one who would possess such technology was the Einsborn family's infamous Magus killer. It was only natural that they would be intrigued by the corpse, given its extraordinary ability to merge with a servant, a trait that only a Magus could appreciate as being of great worth. For the Einsborn family, who specialize in the creation of homunculi, this vessel was a true gem among gems. This couldn't be more perfect. While Saber might be a formidable opponent, I can use this opportunity to eliminate both Lord El Meloy and the Magus killer at once. Tokyomi smiled confidently. He had already set up a bounded field, making this location his own battlefield. Dealing with a researcher like Lord El Meloy and a lowly Magus would be effortless. Even if the opponent summoned a servant, he could use his command seals to summon Gilgamesh, giving him the upper hand. The most important thing was, Tokyomi, has your assassin established an ambush in this area? Tokyomi communicated with his most reliable disciple using a gem imbued with Magecraft. Yes, teacher. The ambush has been put in place, Kairi replied. It's not just Kenneth, but also the insidious Magus from the Einsborn family that we must contend with. I intend to take them out all at once. I'll let you know when I'm ready. I will require the aid of assassin, Tokyomi stated. I understand, teacher. Tokyomi nodded in agreement. He trusted Kairi, who was a participant in the Holy Grail War and had no flaws or evil. As long as Kenneth and Kiritsugu fell into his trap, Tokyomi was confident he could kill them. This place had already become his workshop. Even if they combined their servants, they may not be a match for Gilgamesh. Most importantly, with Assassin already in ambush, as soon as Tokyomi saw an opportunity, he would give the order for a surprise attack and kill them. By eliminating both Saber and Lancer in a single move, and with Caster already defeated, we have removed 3 servants from the playing field, Tokyomi remarked. According to the intelligence gathered by him, eliminating Saber and Lancer at this juncture would give him a strategic advantage. He dismissed Berserker as a mindless beast and deemed Rider's master, a reckless youth, as a non-threat. As for Assassin, Tokyomi believed that Kairi, who was there to support the Tosaka family, would ultimately use a command seal to force Assassin to take their own life. If we emerge victorious in this battle, the Holy Grail shall be mine. The 100-year aspiration of the Tosaka family shall finally be realized under my hands, Tokyomi exclaimed, gripping his staff tightly with mounting excitement as he saw victory within reach. However, is it really that simple? Shirou, Kiritsugu, Kairi, and Tokyomi were not divine beings, they did not possess the ultimate truth. Their actions, beliefs, and goals were all intertwined and had resulted in a convoluted tangle of chaos. What should be the ultimate outcome of this situation? C55. Through the binoculars, Shirou observed Tokyomi as he entered the police hospital. What is he doing here? Shirou furrowed his brow in confusion. He had originally planned to use Ryu Unosuke as bait to lure Kiritsugu and then kill him, but he never expected his target to shift to Tokyomi. Kill him. Shirou almost immediately changed the target of his attack. Compared to Tokyomi, Kiritsugu was insignificant now. Shirou and Spartacus formed an alliance, thinking he had a chance against Waver and Iskander because Iskander did not possess a noble phantasm that could instantly kill Spartacus. However, Gilgamesh was a different story. The opponent held a noble phantasm that not only could kill Spartacus instantly, but also could destroy his unlimited blade works. It was a formidable enemy. To contend with Gilgamesh, their only option was to target Tokiomi. But Tosaka Tokiomi had always been hiding in his mansion, protected by a powerful bounded field. Shirou did not know if Gilgamesh would be in the mansion or not, so he had not intended to attack Tosaka Tokiomi. However, the opponent has unexpectedly appeared here, providing an opportunity for Shirou. Kill. At the very least, he should try to cut off his hands. This may be the best opportunity to neutralize Gilgamesh. Compared to Gilgamesh, who had dragged Shirou into the war and consistently oppressed him, Kiritsugu and even the Night King Artoria were insignificant. This was a golden opportunity. Shirou's first priority was to make Gilgamesh withdraw from the Holy Grail War. As long as Gilgamesh withdrew, Shirou would be free to do as he pleased, whether it be to fight or hide, to stay in Fuyaki City, or go to Hokkaido, there would be no obstacles. With this thought in mind, Shirou put down his binoculars and prepared to infiltrate the police hospital. Kiritsugu, who had been relying on drone monitors to track his targets, furrowed his brow. The monitor at the police hospital had been destroyed, leaving him in the dark about the situation inside. Meanwhile, the suspected master of the Matu family had begun to make his move. The destruction of the monitor at the police station hospital indicated that there was a problem inside, and it was highly likely that someone was lying in wait for him. This person could be another master, or it could be that the master of Castor was not dead and had anticipated Kiritsugu's arrival, setting a trap. However, this assumption was at odds with the actions of Castor's master the day before. Kiritsugu couldn't help but wonder what the reality of the situation was. Kiritsugu, unaware of the strange circumstances, found himself in a familiar situation. As a Magus killer, he knew that during the Holy Grail War, there could potentially be multiple masters in this police hospital. Without hesitation, Kiritsugu opened the large toolbox beside him to prepare for whatever choice he needed to make. Normally, Kiritsugu's toolbox would be filled with handguns, sniper rifles, and other firearms. But this toolbox was different. Its wide and heavy appearance was a clear indication that it was filled with Kiritsugu's most treasured weapon, a portable rocket launcher, specifically an RPG. With the knowledge that there was a problem in this police hospital and at least 2 masters present, Kiritsugu's plan was simple. Why bother going in when he could just fire a few RPGs and send them all to heaven? He expertly loaded the bulky RPG rocket launcher with a steady hand, the weight of the weapon barely registering in his grip. He stood tall on the roof of the car, his eyes locked onto the nearest power plant looming in the distance. He took a deep breath, steadied his aim, and pressed the launch button. Whoosh! Shirou moved cautiously as he made his way into the police hospital, unnoticed by Tosaka Tokiomi. He was just about to let out a sigh of relief when a loud sound filled his ears. Startled, he looked up and was met with a sight that left him stunned. A rocket was spinning through the air, leaving a long trail of smoke in its wake as it hurtled toward a nearby diesel power plant. Shit! Without hesitation, Shirou quickly rolled to the side and jumped into a nearby small pond, instantly projecting multiple shield plates around himself to create a crude barrier for protection. The next moment, boom! A sound like thunder blasted in Shirou's ears, and he felt the ground beneath him tremble violently. There was no mistaking it, the power plant had been blown apart in a devastating explosion. The next moment, boom boom boom! The sound of even more terrifying explosions rang out, and a sudden burst of heat erupted, like a fiery inferno unleashed upon the world. Shirou, even while submerged in the water, could feel the burning sensation as if it was consuming everything in its path. There was no doubt that the RPG bombing of the power plant had caused a major explosion in the building, and the diesel inside had been ignited as a result. Feeling that the outside had calmed down, Shirou opened some of the shields around him and his head emerged from the water, surveying the area. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva as he looked around. Everywhere his gaze fell, he saw nothing but ruins, crumbling walls, and withered branches. A sea of fire. An RPG caused a huge explosion and it destroyed a quarter of the police hospital. If there were still people in the police station's hospital, the casualties would be incalculable. His throat constricted as he struggled to swallow. This is brutal, but who could have done such a thing? Kiritsugu, could it be you? Shirou's initial suspicion fell on Kiritsugu, as he was his primary target. However, as he had not seen Kiritsugu present at the scene, he couldn't be certain if it was him or someone else. It was also possible that the perpetrator had expertly concealed themselves and had outsmarted Shirou's detection abilities, attacking him in a spot where he had let his guard down. As he was deep in thought, a sudden whoosh caught his attention. He looked up to see another RPG rocket soaring through the sky, hurtling towards a distant building. Damn it! There's another one! Shirou swore as he quickly dove back into the water, using his shield to protect himself tightly. Faced with Kiritsugu's formidable RPG attack, Shirou was not the only one affected. Even Tokiomi, who had been waiting in the hospital building with a composed smile on his face, couldn't help but furrow his brow. As expected of the despicable Magus killer. Using missiles to attack me. Tokiomi felt slightly troubled because this meant that most of the arrangements he had set up around the hospital were basically destroyed. However, he did not let any hint of composure slip. The poise and grace of nobility had been ingrained in him for a long time, and even under the most difficult circumstances, he would not let himself appear undignified. The destruction of most of his arrangements by the missile attack did not mean defeat for him. Tokiomi chuckled and reached out to Kaire. Kaire, bring in assassin. That insignificant Magus will certainly investigate after the bombing to check if I and the El Meloy have been killed. Use this opportunity to draw their attention, and have assassin eliminate both him and El Meloy. I understand, teacher. Tokiomi nodded, then ended the communication. He knew that his student, who had been serving in the Holy Church all this time, would use assassin to aid him. I must express my gratitude to Kaire. Once he graduates, I will give him a more precious gift. Tokiomi thought to himself. However, he was unaware that at that very moment, Kaire, the person he trusted, was secretly mocking his naivety. Preparations for the war were plentiful, the considerations were thorough, and even the enemy's character and movements were studied in depth, yet it was always at this crucial moment that Tokiomi failed to notice the small details that determined the outcome. Indeed, Kaire was not in the basement of the church, but in a small hotel located not far from the police hospital. The people around there had been dispersed by him, otherwise, Kiritsugu's RPG would have caused a commotion. Shall we go inside, master? Assassin, who stood before Kaire, asked. No, just wait outside, Kaire said. Oh? Are you planning to take action against Tokiomi? The assassins were aware of the alliance between Kaire and Tokiomi, however, they soon came to realize that the bond between the two was fragile and could easily be severed. Following the war, they believed that the alliance had indeed crumbled, with Kaire allegedly scheming to take action against Tokiomi. Kaire remained silent, simply taking a seat in the chair and glancing over at the unconscious Ryu Unosuke. He then reached over and plucked the transparent film, imbued with magical energy from Ryu Unosuke's right hand. A small, almost imperceptible smile curled the corners of his lips. To think that such a childish method of disguising the master was effective, fooling even the most astute among us, Kaire mused. It's no wonder Gilgamesh has taken an interest in him. Kaire withdrew a book of God's teachings from his pocket, flipping through the pages as he pondered. His understanding of God's law had undergone a huge shift. With only 5 rockets remaining in his luggage, Kiritsugu launched each one until the once grand police hospital was reduced to nothing more than a pile of rubble, engulfed in raging flames. Kiritsugu methodically organized his weapons, making sure to replace all the bullets in his prized gun with origin bullets. With everything in order, he charged into the police hospital. The RPG caused a chain reaction that detonated the power plant, resulting in nearly 9 consecutive explosions. Kiritsugu couldn't be certain if the master hiding inside had been killed, but if the opponent had set up any bounded fields within the police hospital, they were now undoubtedly destroyed. His remaining objective was to enter the building, search for corpses, and eliminate any masters who were still clinging to life. After submerging for some time, Shirou felt as though the oxygen in his lungs was running low, but the explosions outside had finally ceased. He emerged from the water and looked around, a chill running down his spine as he surveyed the destruction. The scene before him was devastating, towering buildings reduced to rubble, lush greenery reduced to ashes. Everywhere he looked all he saw was fire, like a sea of flames that had consumed everything. The thick black smoke rose and darkened the sky, making it feel like a giant hand of darkness was covering it, and the light had become dim. It was impossible to fathom the amount of money that had been lost in this single attack. Shirou pushed these thoughts aside, knowing that now was not the time to dwell on them. The current situation suggested that Tosaka Tokiomi was undoubtedly present within the police hospital, and that the previous RPG attack was highly likely to have been carried out by Kiritsugu. With this in mind, the police hospital presented the perfect opportunity for Shirou to defeat Gilgamesh and Artoria. The flames roared around Shirou, casting an eerie glow on his face as he dismissed his shields and projected two long, sharp swords, holding them firmly in his hands. Regardless of whether it was Tokiomi or Kiritsugu, he was determined to defeat them both and ensure his survival. After all, what is life but the desire to simply exist? And if using everything at one's disposal is necessary to achieve that, then so be it. C5-6. The inferno blazed out of control, consuming everything in its path with reckless abandon. The fiery red flames danced wildly, painting the landscape a dark black with each brush stroke. The scene was one of destruction, the acrid scent of burnt earth carried on the wind. The smoke was thick and black, obscuring Shirou's vision. He held two swords at the ready as he searched through the ruins for the two prey he had set his sights on. He refrained from merging with his Saint Graph, unwilling to act recklessly. If he revealed his servant's aura, Tokiomi or Kiritsugu would likely summon their own servants on the spot. His demi-servant's aura was unique, and if he used it, it would be like playing a melody on the battlefield. Even with the thick black fog, it would not be able to conceal his presence. The only way to have a chance of killing Tokiomi and Kiritsugu would be if he merged with his Saint Graph at the crucial moment. Half a month ago, if Shirou had found himself in this situation, he would have fled without hesitation. But this was his only chance to defeat Gilgamesh. He was willing to take any risk to make Gilgamesh withdraw. Shirou's heart was filled with hate. He knew that he had no chance of victory if he faced Gilgamesh head-on. His only option was to eliminate Gilgamesh by killing Tosaka Tokiomi. And now, with Tokiomi finally emerging from his magical workshop, was there a better opportunity than this? Shirou forced down his surging emotions and cautiously advanced through the thick black smoke. He needed to be careful not to merge with his Saint Graph in order to have a chance to kill Tokiomi and Kiritsugu, but that also meant that he would be extremely vulnerable to being killed. But the opportunity was right in front of him. If he didn't take action, would he just wait for Gilgamesh to kill him at the end of the war? That was not an option. However, even without merging with his Saint Graph, Shirou had protected himself to the teeth. He used projection to create impenetrable armor, added a helmet that protected his eyes like a crusader's, and then used reinforcement to increase the armor and helmet's hardness. Finally, he projected a few shield attached to his armor. He also split 13 magic circuits to strengthen his body, so as not to be burdened with too much weight and affect his speed. With this triple defense on his body, as long as it's not a special bullet like a sniper rifle, he should be able to withstand it. Suddenly, his intuition kicked in again, and Shirou felt a gaze fixed firmly upon him. The next moment, whoosh! The sound of a bullet slicing through the air reached Shirou's ears, and he instinctively turned his head in the direction of the noise. Before he could react, however, he felt the rush of air slice against his skin like a knife. In the next moment, a loud thud echoed through the air as the shield he had projected behind him was pierced, as if it were no more than a flimsy piece of paper. Shirou crouched behind a pile of ruins, his body was covered in a cold sweat. He reached out with his mind, manifesting several spears and firing them toward the source of the gunfire, using the collapsed wall as cover. Clang, clang, clang. The spears collided with the rocks, producing a sharp metallic ring. A thick, black fog enveloped the area, and smoke billowed through the air, obscuring everything inside amidst a raging inferno. Shirou was left unsure of what was happening on the other side of the smoke. He cautiously peered out, trying to assess the situation, but a sudden whoosh of wind caught his attention once again. Before he could react, a sharp bullet pierced through his shield and lodged itself in a nearby stone pillar. Shirou quickly retreated and pressed himself against the ruins, his heart pounding and adrenaline coursing through his veins. Kiritsugu! Shirou muttered under his breath. There's no mistaking it. This must be Kiritsugu's doing. He was surprised by the ambush and had the impulse to merge with his Saint Graph, but his reason held him back. If he had given in to that impulse, he would not have been facing bullets, but rather, Artoria's holy sword and Gilgamesh's treasury. Stay calm, Shirou repeated to himself as he fought to keep his nerves under control. He then took a deep breath, and removed the helmet from his head, using his sword to push it away. Ping! His arm dropped as a bullet pierced straight through his helmet. He swallowed hard and quickly put the helmet back on, his forehead now slick with cold sweat. Shirou was puzzled. This is strange, he thought. Kiritsugu was using a sniper rifle, but how did he manage to aim at me under these conditions? The black smoke from the sea of fire would have made it impossible to locate me. Yet, he found me and shot with incredible accuracy. Did he use something to pinpoint my position? He scanned his surroundings and finally, about 20 meters above his head, he spotted a very small flying device. Dash drone. Shirou gnashed his teeth. This guy is too dirty. Shirou quickly summoned a sharp sword with his projection and aimed it at the small flying drone, shooting it down. Buzz. Kiritsugu held his sniper rifle, watching his opponent on the other side, when he heard the sound of static on the monitoring screen, indicating that the drone had been discovered. But it didn't matter, he had already locked in on his opponent's position. As the helmet of his opponent came back into view of his telescope, Kiritsugu hesitated before taking the shot. Bang! Through the scope, Kiritsugu watched as his opponent's helmet swayed for a moment before slowly dropping. But something was off. He had fired several shots in succession and yet his opponent was still able to lift his head, indicating that he was still alive and had even managed to destroy the drone. Kiritsugu thought for a moment and made a decision in his heart. Shirou, feeling a sense of relief now that he had dismantled Kiritsugu's surveillance drone, quickly came to the realization that his current location was no longer secure. He knew that if Kiritsugu decided to use an RPG, he would be in grave danger. In an effort to throw Kiritsugu off his trail, Shirou employed the use of Broken Phantasm to ignite the shield he had projected, creating an explosion and a sandstorm that would obscure Kiritsugu's line of sight. Putting his escape plan into action, Shirou sprinted toward the prison while taking cover behind a large stone pillar. Summoning 5 spears, he hurled them in the direction from which Kiritsugu's previous shots had originated. He then activated the Broken Phantasm once more, causing a series of deafening explosions to erupt. Boom, 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 boom. Broken Phantasm is a relatively simple technique, which involves a servant detonating their noble phantasm. Shirou had frequently employed this method during his Saint Graph fusion, allowing him to master it without activating his own Saint Graph. However, in comparison to when he used Saint Graph, this Broken Phantasm is significantly weaker. The weapons that are detonated are only those that have been projected by Shirou, and their power is quite low, akin to that of small hand grenades. Shirou continued to project and detonate 13 weapons in succession in order to create a smokescreen. He then slowly advanced toward Kiritsugu's position. While the Broken Phantasm bombing might not have been enough to kill Kiritsugu outright, the real aim was to land a fatal blow in close combat. As they say, it's always best to go for the head, the safest and surest way to end a threat. Despite being outmatched against a servant, Shirou retained confidence in his ability to deal with these magi. Although he would risk being discovered by Tokiomi if he approached Kiritsugu, Shirou believed that he could kill Kiritsugu swiftly enough to minimize the danger. However, after finally finding Kiritsugu's latest location, the scene he saw made Shirou's face turn ashen. Instead of finding him, all Shirou could see was a sniper rifle and a surveillance monitor left behind. It was clear that Kiritsugu had fled before Shirou had carried out his fire suppression attack. No, Kiritsugu is not someone that would run away from a fight. It was an ambush. As this realization dawned on him, Shirou's mind automatically projected and strengthened several barriers around him, creating a protective shell around his body. But before he could react further, a hand grenade landed at his feet. Boom! The barriers were impacted, swaying violently as several layers were instantly destroyed. Shirou quickly replenished the barriers, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He was grateful that he had reacted in time, as even a delay of a second or two would have resulted in his demise. Feeling safer with the barriers in place, Shirou started to retreat slowly. Believing himself to be secure, he didn't notice that Kiritsugu was watching him from a distance, swapping out his ammunition. He unzipped his coat, took out armor-piercing incendiary rounds from the clip on his waist, and loaded them into his rifle. These bullets were specifically designed by Kiritsugu to deal with opponents like Shirou, who believed they were safe behind steel armor. Usually loaded into Type 53 rifles, but they are not very mobile. So Kiritsugu modified them to fit into his own rifle. Bang! Shua! While the sound of bullets striking the barrier echoed from outside, Shirou paid it no mind. However, when a small hole appeared in the barrier and flames burst through, he was taken aback. Without hesitation, he dismissed the barrier and projected another one to extinguish the flames, cutting off the source of the fire from his fortress. Shirou retreated rapidly and projected a spear towards the source of the bullets. In midair, the spear exploded with a resounding boom. Kiritsugu, who was firing, rolled on the ground and made a hasty escape. However, the heat wave from the blast stirred up sand and debris, pelting Kiritsugu with small stones that dug into his arm, drawing blood. Cradling his wounded arm, Kiritsugu vanished into the thick fog and fearlessly plucked the stones from his flesh. Blood streamed from the wounds, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. C57. Crouched behind a crumbling wall in the ruins of the orthopedics department, Shirou scanned his surroundings warily. His status as a demi-servant, and the fact that he was believed by the other masters to have retired from the Holy Grail War, offered him a crucial edge in his current predicament. Wait. Shirou frowned. He knew that Gilgamesh, Kairi, and possibly even Tokiomi were aware of his true identity. If Tokiomi knew, then why had he ventured out of the safety of the Tosaka mansion and ventured into the war zone? Surely, his best chance of victory would be to remain hidden and wait for Gilgamesh to eliminate the other masters. His mind was awash with questions, only adding to his confusion. Why had Kiritsugu also come to the ruins? Was it a difference in information, or did they know that Castor and his master were still alive and come here with the determination to deliver the final blow and prevent the possibility of the mystery being revealed again? As he pondered this new possibility, a glimmer of understanding began to dawn on Shirou. If Kiritsugu and Tokiomi were aware of his true identity, it would mean that he could only deceive Waver and Kaneth. His mind then flashed back to his battle with Iskandar the day before. If Iskandar had also known his true identity, then it would mean that Kaneth was the only one who had been fooled. Disappointment washed over him at the realization that his plan had failed. Nevertheless, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction in having captured a big fish like Tokiomi. Being a demi-servant and a master of Matu family, no one could detect his true identity before he fused with a Saint Graph. If he had disguised himself as a Magus and confronted Tosaka and Kiritsugu, and at a critical moment, fused with a Saint Graph, he could have killed them in an instant without them even having a chance to release a command seal. It was a risky move, but the potential reward was worth it. With this thought in mind, Shirou crept forward cautiously. Even though the potential reward was great, for now, he knew it would be best to proceed with caution. After all, there were only 3 of them in this abandoned police hospital, and he couldn't let his guard down for a moment. As Tokiomi walked through the police hospital, the only area that remained relatively untouched was the morgue. The gloomy atmosphere did not affect him in the least as he patrolled the area. The young boy who was the master of Castor had already been killed, and Kairi had informed him that the body was being kept in this police hospital. Therefore, the valuable vessel that could be used to fuse with a servant must be stored in one of the morgue's cabinets. Tokiomi had already conducted several patrols of the morgue, opening around 10 cabinets in search of the master of Castor. He found several pale corpses, some of which were missing vital organs, and some that were relatively intact. The fate of these corpses was unknown to him, but they did not elicit any reaction from Tokiomi, not even a flicker in his eyes. While Tokiomi searched through the cabinets, he contacted Kairi and inquired, "Has assassin arrived at their position yet? Who are you planning to take out first, teacher? A Magus without dignity is not worth mentioning, but a respected lord is worthy of the utmost respect. Let us first dispose of that undignified and dishonorable Magus, and then I will respectfully entertain this well-known lord." "Yes, teacher. My assassin is always ready to follow your orders." Tokiomi ended the call and pushed the open mortuary cabinet closed. There were several corpses in the mortuary cabinet and over 100 cabinets in the room. Opening them one by one, he did not know how long it would take to find the right one. He mumbled to himself, "First, I should go entertain these 2 guests, then come back and slowly search for the child's corpse. Speaking of which, Sakura seems to have called him brother, it's a pity. If he wasn't involved in this war, Sakura might have had one more good friend. But it doesn't matter now. When the war is over, I will send Sakura to Finland. There, it is a good place for her to grow up." He took out a short sword from his pocket. This sword, known as the Azoth sword, is a type of mystic code frequently used in the Mages Association. It is common for teachers or parents to give it as a gift during coming-of-age ceremonies. Tokiomi had planned to give this sword to Kairi as a graduation gift. With this thought in mind, he put the Azoth sword back in his pocket and left the morgue. Dong, dong, dong. Kairi sat in his seat, tapping the armrest with his index finger as he attentively listened to the intelligence report being delivered by the assassin besides him. "We've received reports of a gunfight and explosion occurring inside the hospital. The method of the explosion matches Castor's known attack patterns. So, it's not Lord El Meloy who's responsible for this, but that child. Kairi turned to look at Ryu Unosuke, who lay beside him with a blank expression on his face. It appears he's using this as a trap to lure Kiritsugu into an ambush and kill him. Can a child really come up with such a plan, or is it the servant's ruthless nature that's controlling the child? Kairi stroked his chin thoughtfully before saying, given the current situation, let's try to get as many assassins inside as possible amidst the chaos. Is this in preparation for drawing the net, master? The assassin asked. No, replied Kairi as he stood up and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He gazed out at the thick black smoke rising from the police hospital. Just go in and kill that child. Once you've taken care of him, stay on the outskirts and keep watch. I understand. But why? Gilgamesh wants to protect the child, but I'll kill him just to see the look on Gilgamesh's face. It's sure to be priceless, said Kairi with a smile. I'm also quite curious about the flame he mentioned. Master, the assassin added, there's one more thing. The fire truck and police cars are already on their way here. Stop them. Don't let them come here until I get the answers I want. Yes, master. The assassin disappeared without further ado. Shirou stumbled forward, his vision clouded by thick black smoke. The overpowering smell of charcoal dominated all other scents, surrounding him in its noxious embrace. Suddenly, boom! An explosion erupted in the distance, followed by a staccato burst of gunfire. Could that be Tokiomi and Kiritsugu? Shirou projected two swords in his hands as he rushed toward the source of the flashing fire. Dash, dash! As the sound of something breaking through the air reached his ears, Shirou felt a wave of impending death wash over him. Without hesitation, he quickly rolled out of the way, his instincts taking over. Just in time, Shirou's quick roll saved him as three black knives flew overhead, narrowly missing him. If he had hesitated, the knives would have found their mark, resulting in his death. His body tensed as he crouched low, scanning the area from where the knives had been thrown. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he caught sight of the attackers. Assassins! His eyes were filled with the sight of assassins. Not just in front of him. Shirou's eyes darted around, taking in his surroundings, and he soon realized that he was surrounded by assassins. He had no time to count their numbers, but judging by the scale of the attack, there were likely more than 30 of them closing in on him. C58. What was happening? Was Kairi involved in this situation too? I should have considered that possibility and seen it coming. If Tokiomi and Kiritsugu were both here, it was likely that Kairi was involved as well. Was this lack of foresight due to my mortal limitations or a flaw of mine to become so focused on my goals that I failed to see the bigger picture? Shirou didn't know, but even with the ability to fuse with a Saint Graph, the odds of defeating an attack from over 30 assassins were slim. Without fusing, his chances of escape were even less. So without hesitation, he merged with the Saint Graph and soared towards an old man while brandishing his two swords. Assassin, Hassan of the 100 Faces, possessed the noble phantasm delusional illusion. This skill allowed him to split his personality, creating independent individuals for different tasks. Each personality manifested in various forms, with differences in gender, age, height, and other physical attributes, while remaining the same race. Since this skill relies on splitting oneself, the overall power of the skill remains constant, no matter how many splits are created. Consequently, the more splits that are made, the weaker the individual abilities become. However, there is an exception to this rule, which pertains to Assassin's class skill, Presence Concealment. This skill is not affected by the number of splits made. As a result, each individual 100-faced Hassan persona is relatively weak, with the 100-faced Hassan in the form of an old man being the weakest among them all. Picking the softest persimmon to squeeze is something even a child understands, so there is no reason Shirou wouldn't understand this. Shirou saw the other assassins closing in, with the old man assassin brandishing two knives in an attempt to slow him down. Without hesitation, Shirou hurled a long sword and activated Broken Phantasm, temporarily blinding the old man. He readied himself to employ a flash battle strategy to escape, but despite their individual weakness, the assassin was a legendary killer with vast combat experience. Suddenly, in a swift movement, the old man closed his eyes and lunged toward Shirou with astonishing accuracy. Caught off guard, Shirou had no choice but to quickly flip his wrist and use the blade of the sword in his other hand to defend himself. The sound of metal clashing echoed as their swords met. The force of the impact sent vibrations through his arm, and he knew that this would be no easy battle. Boom! Kiritsugu scrambled to take cover behind a pile of rubble, his forehead gushing blood. He lay there, panting heavily. This aura, it's a servant, but... Upon sensing the aura, Kiritsugu immediately recognized it as belonging to a servant. Furthermore, he deduced that the servant in question was of the caster class. Taking a deep breath, Kiritsugu understood that the young man named Ryunashuk was not the true master of caster, but rather a mere tool used to conceal the servant's true identity. With this confirmation, Kiritsugu knew it was time to retreat. As a hitman, he knew that the first assassination attempt had failed, and it was time to fall back and reassess his strategy. But... Clink clink clink. As a red gem rolled towards Kiritsugu's hiding spot from behind, his eyes narrowed in alarm and he quickly rolled again to avoid it. The gem emitted a dazzling red light, then... Boom! The explosion set off a raging inferno as the combustible materials around it burst into flames. Son-in-law of the Einsburn family, why don't you reveal yourself and allow me, the supervisor of Fuyuki City, to demonstrate the true meaning of being a host? To think that you would attempt to steal the vessel capable of fusing with a servant from my grasp, your abilities are clearly not sufficient. Kiritsugu heard a calm and elegant voice, accompanied by footsteps, coming from behind him. He immediately recognized it as belonging to the head of the Tosaka family, Tokiomi. A vessel that can be fused with a servant. Kiritsugu leaned against the wall, furrowing his brows in deep thought. Suddenly, a realization struck him. So that's it. However, despite this newfound understanding, Kiritsugu was still entangled with Tokiomi and was unsure of what to do next. He continued to ponder his next move. Unlike the magus he had hunted in the past, Tokiomi had a thorough understanding of his abilities and was fully prepared for their encounter, leaving no room for any opportunities in a direct confrontation. If things continued as they were, he feared Tokiomi would ultimately be the one to take his life. As an assassin, Kiritsugu knew that being discovered meant a death sentence. He had already begun to mentally prepare for the retreat. However, just as he had used a monitor to track Shirou, Tokiomi had also set up numerous familiars to monitor his movements. The flash and smoke bombs that Kiritsugu had set behind him were ineffective against Tokiomi. The head of the Tosaka family had made extensive preparations before their confrontation, leaving no weaknesses to exploit. In fact, if Kiritsugu had not previously used an RPG to disrupt Tokiomi's bounded field, he would have already been defeated. Kiritsugu was at a loss. He raised his arm and gazed at the command seals etched on the back of his hand. With the situation at hand, Kiritsugu realized that the only way to escape was to summon Artoria using the command seals. However, as Iris Veal had previously reported, Artoria was currently in the castle, engaged in a debate with the King of Conquerors and Archer. Kiritsugu knew that if he were to use the command seals, Tokiomi would likely do the same to summon that enigmatic Archer. Can Artoria defeat Archer in a direct confrontation? Kiritsugu felt a deep sense of anxiety in his heart. Archer had revealed multiple noble phantasms on the first night, and Kiritsugu couldn't help but wonder if he possessed some deadly noble phantasm as well. He guessed that in a direct confrontation, Artoria would not be a match for Archer. So, if I were to summon the Night King at this moment, the chances of defeat would be higher than they are now. Kiritsugu weighed his options, considering the choice between two unfavorable outcomes, a high probability of defeat or an even higher probability of defeat. Despite the difficulty of the decision, he had already made up his mind deep in his heart. Shirou managed to break through the encirclement of assassin and released his Saint Graph to prevent himself from standing out like a beacon in the night. He then made his way toward the location where the fire was the most intense and the smoke was the thickest. He found himself in the morgue of the hospital, which had miraculously remained intact. Inside the gloomy morgue, the air was chilled and heavy with the stench of death. As soon as Shirou stepped inside, a strong smell of formaldehyde assaulted his senses, causing him to wrinkle his brow in disgust and hesitate for a moment before finally proceeding. The deep grey walls loomed around him and the sight of a corpse lying in an ice coffin added to the eerie atmosphere. The pungent smell of formaldehyde and the sense of otherworldliness made Shirou's breathing quicken. Shoo, shoo. The sound of movement outside reached Shirou's ears, causing his heart to tighten. He quickly located an empty cabinet and opened it, ready to hide inside. Shirou thought to himself, by releasing his Saint Graph and then using the smell of death and formaldehyde to mask his own scent, he should be able to evade assassin's pursuit, right? Faced with the choice between feigning death or actually dying, Shirou chose the former. With a cab sound, he opened a cabinet, but before he could even look inside, he saw a figure sitting up. Startled, he instinctively projected a sword and swung it. Clang! Shirou's sword struck a gun, producing a clashing sound of metal. He peered closely and finally saw the figure in the cabinet. It wasn't a corpse, but rather a man with blood on his face, dressed in a black coat, and a pale complexion. It was Kiritsugu. F***ck. He too had been hiding in the morgue and was using the same strategy as Shirou, hiding in the cabinet to evade capture. Both men were locked in a tense standoff, each one's weapon trained on the other's head, ready to pull the trigger or strike at any moment. The situation was strange and surreal, as if time had frozen in that instant. One small movement from either of them could mean the end for the other. They both held each other's fate in their grasp, yet neither made a move. "Are you the master of Caster?" Kiritsugu asked, his voice steady. "Or, rather, are you Caster? Did some sort of summoning mistake cause you to become one with your master?" Despite the surge of adrenaline and racing heart, Shirou managed to keep his composure. "It seems that you have already deduced the truth, Mr. Magus Killer," Kiritsugu stated with a cold voice. "If I couldn't deduce something as obvious as this, it would mean I have failed as an assassin." Shirou responded with a measured voice, "I cannot judge whether you have failed or not, but based on your current state, it appears that Tokiomi has dealt you a significant blow." "Indeed," Kiritsugu replied, his expression serious. "Shall we work together?" "Why should I work with you?" Shirou asked curiously. "Are you not also being pursued by assassins?" "Of course," Shirou replied. "Neither you, nor your King of Knights, nor even the King of Conquerors would stand a chance against Tosaka's servant. If we allow Tokiomi to live, we will certainly lose. Moreover, neither of us stands a chance of escaping alone." He then fixed Kiritsugu with a steady gaze. "So, why not work together? But can you trust me?" Kiritsugu's expression remained unreadable as he responded, "I don't trust you, just as you don't trust me. If you were a normal servant, my gun would not be a threat to you. However, now that you have taken on a mortal form, my gun is a threat to you. As we both have something to hold over each other, how about we demonstrate our sincerity by lowering our weapons simultaneously on a countdown?" "All right." Shirou nodded. 3, 2, 1. Shirou and Kiritsugu lowered their weapons simultaneously, the tension in the air easing slightly. However, in a sudden and unexpected turn of events, a sword materialized in Shirou's hand with a flick of his wrist. Kiritsugu's reaction was swift. He smoothly reached for another gun at his waist and aimed it at Shirou's head. The two men stood locked in a tense standoff, their weapons trained on each other, ready to act at a moment's notice. C59. "You have no sincerity at all, Mr. Magus Killer," Shirou said, his tone cold. Faced with the pressure of life and death on the first night, it seemed that Shirou had been forced to tap into a new level of courage. He felt that his courage had grown a lot. In the past, when he stood on stage and spoke, he would be so nervous that he couldn't speak properly, but now that Kiritsugu had a gun aimed at his head, his heart rate had only accelerated a little, and he could still speak cohesively. It could be said that people's potential is only brought out under pressure. "You're not so different, are you? This won't work. I certainly can't trust you, and you certainly can't trust me. But we're in this together. I can't escape Assassin's pursuit, and you can't hide from Tokiomi's pursuit. It's mutually destructive," Shirou said, his voice low. "How about a guise?" "I don't have a faith in Mr. Kiritsugu's guise," Shirou said. "How about signing mine?" "I don't believe you either. So, what's the solution?" "The consequences are clear. If we continue to mistrust each other, we both lose. Is that a fair trade-off?" Shirou questioned. "If Mr. Kiritsugu can demonstrate a little genuineness, I am willing to put my trust in you, at least for the time being." Kiritsugu paused for a moment before taking action, firmly grasping Shirou's sword and snapping it in half. He then returned his own gun to its holster. Shirou was surprised. "You truly have the courage. As you point out, if we don't take this step, there is no hope of survival. Since you have demonstrated your sincerity, I will do the same. If you can manage to eliminate Tosaka Tokiomi, I am willing to forfeit the Holy Grail War." Kiritsugu furrowed his brows. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Kiritsugu, now that you have seen through my true identity, you must also know that this body I have descended upon is that of my master. As a hero, how could I possibly participate in this dangerous Holy Grail War using my master's body? So, from the moment I descended, I had planned to withdraw. But that archer, he actually threatened to kill my master if I did not participate in this Holy Grail War. Shirou said, filled with anger at the thought of Gilgamesh's coercion. As long as you kill Tokyo-mi, I will willingly withdraw from the Holy Grail War, Mr. Kiritsugu, Shirou said. I see, Kiritsugu nodded, indicating that he understood. But in reality, he didn't trust a word of it. This caster was even more dirty and cunning than Kiritsugu had thought. He figured that out of every 10 words caster spoke, at least 10 of them were lies. Even if any of his words were true, was there a safer way to withdraw than by dying? Yes. Kiritsugu had already planned to kill Tokyo-mi and then immediately attack Shirou, forcing him to withdraw. But what Kiritsugu didn't know was that Shirou had the same plan. By saying these words, Shirou was showing his sincerity while also expressing his hatred for Gilgamesh. However, this did not mean that he would let Kiritsugu off the hook. Kiritsugu had almost killed him twice, he is not a saint, and therefore it is understandable that Shirou harbors feelings of hatred towards him. He had already made up his mind to first kill Tokyo-mi, then immediately launch a surprise attack on Kiritsugu, beheading him with one swift strike of his sword, and finally leave Fuyuki City with a sense of satisfaction. In any case, let's work together for now, Mr. Kiritsugu, Shirou said, putting on a cheerful smile. Let's work together, caster, Kiritsugu said, his mouth twitching slightly, which could be considered a smile, although it was a forced one. That assassin, their concealment abilities are quite impressive, Tokyo-mi said as he held the staff and knocked it against the ground, then contacted Kaire. Kaire, have all the assassins entered? Tokyo-mi asked. They have all entered, teacher, Kaire replied. I have already assembled them for you. As Kaire finished speaking, several black shadows descended from the sky and then positioned themselves in front of Tokyo-mi. They were the assassins. Tokyo-mi nodded with satisfaction. I will temporarily take command of the assassins, Kaire. Understood, teacher. I have given them their instructions. Thank you, Kaire. Tokyo-mi was satisfied, then looked at the assassins and said, Assassins, your master has temporarily handed over command to me, and now you will take your orders from me. Of course, leader, the assassins responded in unison. Some of the younger members couldn't help but laugh, indicating that they were confident in their abilities, which pleased Tokyo-mi. Now, it was time to set out and hunt for the Magus Killer and Lord El Meloy. Some of you, go ahead and secure the exits. The rest of you, search for Kiritsugu and Lord El Meloy. Tokyo-mi gave the orders, and the assassins dispersed to follow them. Shirou and Kiritsugu were ready to launch their attack on their enemies. I haven't been able to get an exact count, but I believe the number of assassins is over 30, Shirou shared his intelligence with Kiritsugu. I see. I should also mention that there are currently many of Tokyo-mi's familiars outside, their number is unknown, but they're spread all over the area. If we leave here, we'll likely be under surveillance. In that case, our field of vision would be limited, Shirou murmured in agreement. Field of vision. Kiritsugu was surprised, that's a unique way of putting it. Do you still have the surveillance drone? The one you used to keep an eye on me before, Shirou asked Kiritsugu. I'm afraid not, Kiritsugu replied, gesturing to the materials in the mortuary. But for creating familiars, isn't everything we need here? Unfortunately, as a straight-laced hero, necromancy is not something I am familiar with, Shirou understood Kiritsugu's words and responded directly. That's truly unfortunate, Kiritsugu shook his head, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. If it were Artoria, not only would she have refused to participate, the mere mention of using the dead as familiars would have been repugnant to her. But Castor didn't have that same aversion, and he quickly understood Kiritsugu's meaning. It was almost as comfortable as when he was working with his assistant, Mie. He had a fondness for Shirou, but he also knew that the more he liked something, the more dangerous it was for the world. Since Shirou was not his servant, it was better for Kiritsugu to find a way to eliminate him. So, based on the information provided by both of us, it appears that Tokyo-mi Tosaka now has both familiars and over 30 assassin-class servants as detection measures, Kiritsugu said. Caster, would you be willing to lead assassin away first? If I were to have a normal descent, I would not have given a second thought to facing 30 assassins. But since I have descended into my master's body, I cannot retreat without ensuring my master's safety. Kiritsugu, are you trying to scheme against me? Aside from this, do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? Kiritsugu inquired. I wouldn't exactly call it a trick, but we can change our positions. You can go and draw assassin's attention while I take care of Tokiomi, Shirou suggested. I trust your character, and I know you would not sneak attack or scheme against me. But, I don't have a reliable servant, so I can't attract assassin, Kiritsugu said. So, is there nothing left to discuss? Not necessarily, Kiritsugu replied, pulling out a box of formalin. I understand your concern about assassin being able to track your scent and prevent your escape. However, if you draw assassin's attention and then use your skills to mask your servant's aura, spraying some formalin should completely obscure your scent. This strong smell will make it impossible for assassin to track you. Oh, is there a method like that? Shirou took the box of formalin and eyed Kiritsugu suspiciously. But how can I trust that you are not deceiving me? I don't trust you at all, and I know you feel the same way about me. Moreover, I know what kind of person you are, Kiritsugu. I have no doubt about your ability to gather information, Kiritsugu acknowledged. In fact, I believe you possess a noble phantasm or skill that allows you to see through people's true names and abilities. After all, you were able to uncover Lancer's true name and assassin's hiding location on the first night. However, our options are now limited. We can either wait here and let them find us, which would lead to certain death. Or, I can still use my command seals to summon King Arthur, which would give me a chance at survival. But unfortunately, you, caster, won't be so lucky. I understand your point, Kiritsugu, Shirou replied. But let me remind you that neither of us stands a chance of survival. Archer's true name is Gilgamesh, and he possesses the noble phantasm Gate of Babylon. It contains the original versions of all noble phantasms, including the original sword of King Arthur. He can easily defeat King Arthur head-on. So when you talk about a chance at survival, Kiritsugu, don't delude yourself. We're both like grasshoppers on a rope, with no hope of escaping. How can I be sure what you're saying is true? Kiritsugu questioned, with a hint of suspicion in his voice. I assure you, Kiritsugu, Shirou said, with a hint of seriousness in his voice. I would never joke about something as important as this, especially when it concerns the life of my master. Same here, Kiritsugu replied, with an understanding nod. That's what I wanted to express to you as well. Shirou studied Kiritsugu intently, then nodded in agreement. Okay, I trust you. I know you wouldn't take something as serious as your own life lightly, especially when you're so close to achieving your idea of justice. Kiritsugu's eyes narrowed as he thought to himself, he can see right through me. I'll do my best to lead Tokiomi in the opposite direction, Kiritsugu said. I still have 5 flares that I can use to signal my location. Starting with the first one, I'll throw one every 30 seconds. That means, caster, you must eliminate assassin before I run out of flares. Otherwise, I won't be able to signal my location and I'll be killed by Tokiomi. Kiritsugu paused for a moment before continuing, and, of course, I trust that you, caster, also would not take the life of your master lightly. Once Tokiomi Tosaka kills me, you would be next. And in dealing with you, Tokiomi would undoubtedly call upon Gilgamesh. Of course, I am a hero and my master's life is my first priority, Shirou said firmly. After considering their options, Kiritsugu and Shirou, both determined to protect their life, began to take action. Chapter 60, C60. Shirou grabbed the formalin box and dashed out of the mortuary. As he ran, he merged with his Saint Graph, revealing his location. He headed towards the area where the fire burned brightest, the ruins were most extensive, and the smoke was thickest. Due to assassin's presence concealment, Shirou was unable to sense his opponent's presence. However, for reasons unknown to Shirou, he was highly sensitive to sight. He could feel multiple malevolent gazes converging upon him, undoubtedly belonging to assassin. He quickly darted into the ruins he had scouted out earlier and used familiar cover to shield himself from prying eyes. Once he was safely concealed, he promptly ended the fusion of his Saint Graph and hurled the formalin box he was holding into a distant fire. Bang! The box exploded in a fiery blast, sending plumes of flame soaring into the sky. The pungent scent of formalin mixed with the acrid odor of burnt earth, saturating the air and making it hard for him to breathe. Shirou sought refuge in the underground cave ruins, holding his breath as he peered out through a small gap between the broken bricks and tiles of the surrounding buildings. Despite seeing several dark figures approaching, he stayed hidden and carefully watched their movements with one eye. It's assassins! Shirou's heart raced, but he managed to keep his cool. He could maintain his composure thanks to the first night when he had forced himself to be brave. Without that experience, he knew that the adrenaline coursing through his veins would have overwhelmed him by now. As the assassins spread out, Shirou slowly emerged from the cave. He was familiar with the layout of the ruins, which had once been a 3-story outpatient building. This gave him an advantage as he knew the terrain better than his opponents. The fire continued to rage, and in the distance, a faint light flickered, indicating Kiritsugu's location through the use of flares. The countdown has begun. I need to hurry. He stood up, ready to run, but as he looked in the direction of the flares, he was shocked and quickly dropped back down. Ahead of him, there was a tall, collapsed tower, which was the highest point in the area. He could see an assassin perched on top of it, surveying the area. One assassin keeping watch from the highest point, while the others scour the area. Shirou worriedly thought to himself. He understood that he would have to neutralize the assassin on the tower before he could make his escape. However, to accomplish this, he needed to eliminate him quietly, without alerting the other assassins. This task seemed nearly impossible. The difficulty level was too high, wasn't it? Another flare was ignited in the distance, indicating Kiritsugu's location. This meant that he had used 2 flares to signal his whereabouts. With flares being set off at 30-second intervals, starting with 3 and increasing to 5, Shirou understood that he had only 90 seconds to eliminate the assassin on the highest point and reach Kiritsugu's location before the 5th flare expired. His ultimate goal was to kill Tokiomi. The task seemed impossible, the difficulty was too great. But, there's no other way. Shirou gritted his teeth, steeling his resolve. Come on, brain. Think hard. There has to be something that can be done, he urged himself. He racked his brain for a plan, any plan, but in the end, he realized that there was only one option, a risky gamble that could potentially cost him his life. But as he considered this method, a new idea formed in Shirou's mind. The enemy was in the light, while he was in the dark. If this was a gamble, why not take a chance and try to take them all out? Shirou was hesitant about this idea. He knew that his own combat power was only slightly stronger than one assassin, and in terms of fighting experience, he was far inferior to any one of them. In theory, his first instinct should have been to escape. However, he was now considering the possibility of counter-killing. He couldn't help but wonder if this sudden change in thinking was a result of inflating his ego the previous night. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. He knew that this was a risky move, but he felt that he could at least give it a try. According to his calculations, the probability of success was about the same as the probability of escape, so why not take a chance? He knew that it was a gamble, but he was willing to risk it all for a chance at survival. He quickly estimated his current magical energy. After a bit of rest and fusion with the Saint Graph, he felt that he still had enough energy to use unlimited blade works one more time. Shirou knew that fighting head-on with the assassins would undoubtedly lead to his death. However, he had a plan. He would use his noble phantasm, unlimited blade works, to trap the assassins within the reality marble. Once they were inside, the missiles would fly and the assassins would be the ones who would die. His plan was certainly risky, but it held the potential to succeed if he could successfully trap the assassins within unlimited blade works. However, it was important to note that even with the advantage of the terrain and the cover of the fire and smoke, there was still a chance that he may not be able to complete the incantations in time, or the assassins may discover him before he could activate his reality marble. In the end, the success of his plan would rely heavily on the execution, as well as a bit of luck. But it's definitely possible, and worth a try. Having faced the fear of death and found the determination to survive, Shirou had gained the courage to take risks and fight back. He recognized the change within himself. He was no longer the timid and cowardly Shirou of the past. With a resolute decision, he rose to his feet, ready to put his plan into action. Shirou projected a sword and strategically placed it in the ruins. He kept a close eye on the assassins' movements, calculating their field of vision in his mind before making his next move. With each new position, he left behind a sword. This tactic was incredibly dangerous, as one assassin occupied the highest point with the best vantage point, while dozens of others scoured the ruins for him. He had to be extremely cautious to avoid being spotted by the assassin on the high ground, move slowly and cautiously, and evade detection by the other assassins searching for him. The most crucial aspect of the situation was that Kiritsugu's flare had already been used twice, and only 3 remained. This meant that if Shirou failed to kill the assassin or reach Kiritsugu's location within the next 90 seconds, he would lose Kiritsugu's position and cause his death. The assassins would then converge on him and he would ultimately face defeat. Additionally, according to Kiritsugu's intelligence, there were still many of Tokyomi's familiars scattered throughout the entire police hospital, including potentially some in the ruins. As a result, Shirou needed to proceed with great care. While seeking revenge, he also had to be vigilant about evading detection, otherwise, his efforts would be in vain, and he would be outmatched by his enemies. Shirou took a deep breath. He made his way through familiar terrain with careful movements and a bit of luck, managing to reach the highest point of the assassin's location without encountering any obstacles. Along the way, he buried 17 swords strategically. However, this did not ensure success, as laying the groundwork was only the beginning. The decisive outcome was yet to come. Broken Phantasm. Shirou detonated the first sword he had buried, creating a loud explosion. The assassin had presence concealment, making it impossible for Shirou to detect his aura. So, Shirou fixed his gaze on the assassin perched at the highest point.
Thanks for listening.